Well, hello, welcome everyone. This is Trent Blizzard with Modern Forager, and I am going to be here today with Chris May. He's logging in now as we speak. I think that's probably him coming on. Hi, Chris.
Hello there.
All right.
Okay, now let me try share screen again. Actually,
and we are live right now. So let's see how we're looking here. We have a couple dozen people watching. Welcome everyone. Like I said, this is Trent Blizzard, and I'm here with Chris May. And we're going to get the Facebook fired up here too. Make sure that's going good. We should be having some live video on Facebook, but that might not be happening. We'll see.
we were so close. Hi, everybody.
I think it might be going here. Awesome. Okay, so
hang on just a second. I'm sorry. You would have to do this right now, wouldn't it?
It's okay.
I'll be right back. Just a second.
Okay, I think he'll be back in just a minute. It's like we are going live here, so I think that's happening. Yep, all right. So I will do a short introduction for Chris while he comes back on. And we're excited to have Chris today. Chris is a former president of the Arizona Mycological Society and very, very involved with that group right now. And we had the pleasure, Kristen and I, of meeting Chris last, I don't know, it must have been 3 years ago, I think, in Telluride at the Telluride Mushroom Festival. And we were really, really focused on trying to learn on mushrooms at that festival, and have a very fond memory of being on a foray with Chris, who maybe saw that the foray leader wasn't kind of giving us what we needed, and he pulled us aside, and you had the back of your truck open, and we had mushrooms out on your bed, and you were walking us through, and really it was neat. You were speaking to Chris and I at the level that we needed at that time. I don't know, we just remembered you from that, and I guess liked you just have a generous spirit with your information, and you've been really involved over in Arizona, where you have with your group of mushroom hunters there, really shared with the community how to find mushrooms and where to go, and really you've led them right to the mushrooms, which I don't think happens in a lot of states around the country. So I don't know if you feel like talking about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I seem to have a nose for them. I spend a lot of time looking at weather maps and stuff, and so I'm usually able to go right to them. I've got jars and jars of them dried now, and I get more pleasure these days just from showing novices how to do it. And we have so much terrain in Arizona. We have so much habitat here that grows mushrooms on public lands where anyone can pick them, and it's we've got like 10 square miles for every member of our mycological society of places that good mushrooms grow. So I don't worry about giving away any secrets. There's always more places to find them. So
yeah.
And things are really starting to warm up now too. I think we're just about a week from a big pop after all the rain we've had up in the White Mountains, and people are finding some good stuff already. There's someone found a cauliflower mushroom yesterday up on the Mogollon Rim, and so yeah, things are happening. It's a good time to be getting into mushroom hunting. You want me to share my screen now?
Yeah. Why don't you take over and load up your presentation and get that ready. Kristen and I went out this weekend and with the Pikes Peak Mycological Society, went over the Front Range and hunted a couple days over there, and had a really wonderful experience in the Ponderosa Pines finding lobster mushrooms. Kristen, do you want to bring a lobster in? We should hold it up. Anyhow, they're beautiful mushrooms, just these crazy colors, and oh my gosh, they taste so good. So that was fun for us to go find a new terrain. I think she may bring one in over here, Chris, if we wait just a minute before we
Yeah,
start.
sure. That's a real common mushroom up there in Colorado and down here too. Good eating, good texture, and man, when you find them, you can sometimes you can fill a gunny sack with them.
Yeah, look at that guy.
Nice. Now I've got my screen shared. Are you on? I can see you.
Yeah.
Are you seeing my screen?
I am seeing your screen.
Okay.
Let's see if anybody.
I don't know if your lobster is making it to the.
I don't know. Let's see what the people out there say on the chat. And before we get started, we should talk about that. You've got this chat in here, and you can chat to just the panelists. That's Chris and I, or you can chat to everybody. And you also have a Q&A area. You can ask questions. So feel free to ask any questions and say hi. Good, you can see us. Marianne, Brent, I see them saying hi. So I'm going to put this back in the fridge, keep it cold. Why don't you come say hi? Kristen's going to come in and say hi before we get started.
Hey, everyone. Have fun with these two smart dudes.
Okay.
All right.
Go take it away.
All right. Well, if my screen is up and everybody can see it, I'll get started. So yeah, as it says here, I'm no longer the president of the Mushroom Society. That burden and honor goes to Mike Decter these days, but I still try to help out a lot. But at the time I put together this presentation, that's what I was. So here's a typical Arizona scene. This is actually not far from my house, and looking down towards Calvatia Mountain in Phoenix. And I think a lot of people, when they think about mushroom hunting in Arizona, they're like, yeah, Arizona, you got to be kidding. There's no mushrooms there. And, and if they are, they look like this. But as a matter of fact, a lot of the state actually looks like this. And it's full of good mushrooms. So we're going to talk about the desert mushrooms for a while, and then we're going to talk about the mountain and forest mushrooms and all the different kinds of things you can find. Everything looking good so far, Trent?
Yeah, it sure is. And we're getting some chat from the panelists. So
okay, very good.
Good.
All right. Well, now why do I have an annotation there? Let me clear that. Clear all drawings. There, it went away. Okay. So let's talk first about what makes Arizona kind of unique. It's not unique. I mean, there are other places that are like this. California comes to mind, where you go from basically sea level up to very high elevation, 13,000 feet nearly. And so when people think of the desert parts of Arizona, they are thinking, can you see my mouse there, Trent?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. I do have this arrow I can use. Let's see if, yeah, there we go. Okay. So they're thinking of the desert parts down here in the Sonoran Desert, and they're thinking of, Monument Valley and the Navajo Indian and Hopi Indian Reservation up here. So it's high desert and low desert, but in between all this rugged terrain here in the sort of this belt that grows across the middle of the state is very high, very heavily forested, and has some really good stuff. And then there's a little bit more good habitat down here in the southeast corner. Now, if you guys are wondering, I'm sort of looking back and forth. I've got two screens running here, so if I'm looking off screen while I'm talking, it's not because I got stage fright. It's just because I've got two screens to keep an eye on. So let's go through this. I need to get rid of that. And okay, there we go. So yeah, so here's the San Francisco Peaks outside Flagstaff. And those go up to almost 13,000 feet. They've got some great mushroom hunting habitat around them. And many flatlanders and people from back east have been surprised to be passing through on I-40 and find themselves absolutely snowbound and stuck for the night in a roadside hotel in that high terrain. So when you look at it from space with a satellite view, you can see that as I mentioned, you've got the low desert down here, you've got the high desert up here, And in between is this very, very green, lush belt. And in fact, this was taken in winter or spring, and you can see a few spots that actually have a pretty thick blanket of snow. This up here is being the Kaibab Plateau on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. This little white dot is the San Francisco Peaks by Flagstaff. There's a little white line right here. That's the Mogollon Rim. And then, of course, the White Mountains, which is kind of our premier spot. And then even a few down here. That's Mount Graham right there with a little dot of white on it. And this is very heavily forested. In fact, they say this band of forest that goes from sort of northwestern Arizona over well into New Mexico is the biggest stand of Ponderosa pines in the whole country. Then when you get down to these sky islands, I mentioned Mount Graham. This is Mount Lemon by Tucson. Chiricahua Mountains over here at the far southeast corner. These are the Galliuro Mountains here, Santa Rita Mountains here, Huachuca Mountains here. So there's all these very interesting little islands of lush greenery way up high above the desert floor in the southeast corner of the state. And they call them sky islands. And this is Mount Graham. And it's actually, you know, if you measure it top to bottom, it's by far the biggest mountain in Arizona. It goes from like 1,000 feet at the base to almost 11,000 feet at the top. And it's like 40 miles long. It's a mammoth mountain with a lot of good habitat at the top. We lost some of it in a fire a few years ago, but it's still a great place to hunt mushrooms. And you know, the biodiversity down there is just phenomenal. There's like 18 species of hummingbirds, and you can see jaguars and all kinds of crazy stuff down there. And that's also true of the fungi. It gets mushrooms that don't grow anywhere else in the United States. Some well-known mycologists spend a lot of time down there, you know, looking for new species and stuff. We're really blessed that we've got millions and millions of acres of public land, and most of it is wide open to hunting. All of these green colored spots are the various national forests that we have in Arizona. You know, starting up with the Kaibab on both sides of the Grand Canyon and then around Williams, and then the Coconino, which has Flagstaff, and the western end of the Mogollon Rim, and a lot of other good habitat. The Prescott National Forest, this is where I grew up in the mountains outside Prescott. And it's not our prime habitat, but it does surprisingly well. And then over here, the Apache and Sitgraves National Forests, these are they're managed as a unit. So they call it the Apache Sitgraves National Forest. And this is really our premier hunting grounds here. The White Mountains are here. And then you get into the east end of the Mogollon Rim over here, and lots of great places to look. And then all the sky islands are down here in the Coronado National Forest. And then we have the Tonto National Forest, which is mostly desert, but it does have some mushroom habitat, like in the Sierra Anchas. I think Pinal Peak is on the Tonto. Four Peaks, you know, it's not much, but it does exist. They're all open to amateur mushroom hunting. None of them are open to commercial collecting. So if you're thinking of coming down here and collecting commercially, you know, you may or may not get away with it. They will bust you. The other thing that I wanted to show on this map is all of these yellow spots right here. These are the Indian reservations, the Native Americans who are the original owners of this land and were sadly dispossessed of it. They still have some. This is the White Mountain Apache tribe, the White Mountain Apache reservation right here. And they've got magnificent mushroom hunting, just endless, beautiful forests with plenty of good mushrooms. And I know a few members of the tribe who hunt them, and it's a great place. But like all the Indian reservations, it's totally off limits if you're not part of the tribe. You'll get a $400 fine if they catch you there and picking mushrooms. And if they decide you're doing it commercial hunting, you can actually lose your vehicle. So be warned. Yeah, so this is the big Navajo reservation up here. The Hopi reservation's in the middle of it. This is the Hualapai and Havasupai here. San Carlos Apache. This is the Papago or Tohono O'odham down here. And there's a bunch of others. I think we must have 19 or 20 tribes here in the state. So if you're lucky enough to get to know someone who's a member of the tribe, you may get some really good hunting. The Navajos have some up here in the Chusco Mountains too. But if you're not a member of the tribe, I strongly recommend you don't test your luck by going there and trespassing on their lands.
Are they clearly marked for people that get confused?
I think in most cases there's at least a barbed wire fence or something like that, and the roads are signposted. And if you're smart, you know, you're out there with a map, whether it's a paper map or a you know, something GPS on your phone or something, and you know, you should if you're going to be hunting near an Indian reservation, you really should know where the boundaries are and stay off.
And what about the brown on the map? If you can go back, are those the national parks?
Whoops. Let's see here. Doggone it. I need to learn how to flip through slides. I think it's like shift arrow.
There.
Whoops, back. Okay, there we go. The brown is, yes, national parks. So this is Grand Canyon National Park here. This, I think, is saguaro or organ pipe or one of those ones. And let's see, what else is there? That's Canyon de Chelly right there. I think that's actually a Navajo tribal park. There's more than this. I guess I don't know, but those are parks. We also have state parks. And the state parks are all totally off limits, which doesn't really matter. There's only a few places where there's some good mushroom hunting. Dead Horse State Park in the winter is in the riparian zone that gets oysters and some good stuff up by Cottonwood. But most of the state parks are not really all that interesting from a fungal diversity point of view.
You have to get a permit and your Forest Service
no.
For the free picking, is a permit required?
No, none of the forests require amateur collectors to get a permit. They do say it has to be for personal use only, and the discretion on what is personal use is left up to the ranger that you're talking to. I've spoken to a forest ranger who could see that I had over 50 pounds of morels, and you know, they're fine with that. I think if they caught you with 300 pounds of morels and, you know, 6 screen doors drying them, you know, they might go after you for commercial picking. But if you've just got a basket or two, a 5-gallon bucket, or even more than that, they're going to leave you alone. So, yeah. Okay, let's see, where were we? I like having my little arrow here. I'm just gonna put it aside and use it.
It's got your name on it too, just
I know, isn't that cool? Okay, is everything looking good so far?
It looks great to me. Let me see if we have any questions here from the attendees. We have a couple, so I haven't been paying enough attention, so let me take a quick look here. Christina says there's 21 tribes in Arizona. Alicio is asking about a permit to be on the land. If you have a permit to be on the land fishing or hunting, do you know if they still frown on taking mushrooms? And I assume.
Oh, yeah. So what he's talking about there is the state trust land. And that is land that's owned by the state of Arizona. It's held in trust for educational purposes. And periodically they sell it to fund, you know, new schools and stuff. To be on it, you need either a recreational permit or a hunting and fishing permit. My understanding is that if you have either one of those permits, that you can pick mushrooms there and, you know, other sustainable things, berries and whatnot. I don't know that for sure though, so don't quote me. And then that brings up, most of the state trust land is not especially good mushroom habitat anyway. There are some places where there's like riparian zones where cottonwood trees grow and you can pick morels early in the spring, but most of it is not really of much interest. The other one that I didn't put on the presentation is the BLM, Bureau of Land Management. And they have, again, not the greatest mushroom hunting territory, but they have some. I'm thinking of the Wallapai Mountains south of Kingman. They don't show up on the map, but that's up around here. And there's actually, that goes up to, I think, about 8,000 feet. And it has some ponderosas, and it gets some mushrooms when it's been wet up there. They also have a lot of land in southern Arizona. And the big one is this river right here. This is the San Pedro River. And they have a very big nature preserve on the San Pedro River. And again, the documentation is rather scanty to go and find, written regulations. But I have talked to a BLM ranger who says if people are picking mushrooms on BLM land, even on the sort of San Pedro riparian reserve, they're not really worried about that as long as they're doing it sustainably and not damaging any, resources. So, so the BLM land in general is open to non-commercial picking as well.
Okay. One more comment from April Wesley. She says, hello from the White Mountain Apache tribal member. Love AMS, that's the Arizona Mycological Society. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and noting the tribal land barriers.
Yes. Okay. Hi, April. April's a friend of mine. I've hunted with her before, and she's really got the mushroom eyes. We went out and she just killed it on porcini one time. She could find so many that I didn't see, and so I hope to do it again. I think she said the spirit of her grandmother was guiding her, and I thought that was so cool. Because I guess her grandma used to pick the porcini up there too. But yeah, she's a member of this reservation right here. This is the White Mountain Apache reservation. She's a member of that people. Okay, well, great. Let's move on. Okay, so the climate of Arizona, it matches the variability of the habitat and the terrain. I mean, it goes from, 3 inches of rain per year down here around Yuma in the southwestern Sonoran Desert, up and not very much in the rain shadow of the Mogollon Rim up here on the Navajo Reservation. But again, in this high elevation band of forestation that we have that sort of divides Arizona in half, the precipitation can be really, really, really high. And if you get around here in the White Mountains or here on the Mogollon Rim, or up here on the peaks by Flagstaff, or you get down here to the Chiricahuas, I mean, you get 30, 35, 40 inches of precipitation every year, which is actually more than a lot of places in the Northwest that are more famous for mushroom hunting. Yeah, most years we are not really that short of rain and snow. I mean, we always want more, but sometimes we, most of the time we have all we really need. We have 2 dry seasons, spring and fall, and sort of the late spring, early summer is when we tend to get most of our forest fires. And then the monsoons come and everybody's really relieved, and then it dries out again in the fall. And then we get a pretty good dump of snow most winters. And again, it's in that same belt. This is, you're going to see this again and again, this belt of high country that goes across the state diagonally. Again, White Mountains, Mogollon Rim, Flagstaff, Kaibab Plateau by the Grand Canyon. Here's Mount Lemmon, which has the most southerly ski area in the whole United States, up on the north slope of Mount Lemmon above Tucson. And it should show Mount Graham too. They get plenty of snow there. I don't know why it doesn't. Let's see. And then comes the summer monsoon season. So we get about half of our moisture in the winter. We get about half in the summer. And the monsoon seasons, again, follow the same sort of distribution. And so Greer, Mount Baldy, Alpine Nutrioso, this is all and Pine Tap Lakeside. This whole area is called the White Mountains. And that's our really primo mushroom hunting spot. then this sort of linear, elongated region here. This is the Mogollon Rim. And the Mogollon Rim is one of the wettest places in Arizona. It's really, really lush and green and well forested. Then you've got Flagstaff area. Then you've got the North Kaibab up here. You've got Mount Lemmon and the Catalina Mountains around it. And all these southern mountains, the Sky Islands, and even some of the grasslands and oak forest down there that don't really show up as greenery on the satellite photos, they still get quite a lot of rain. And that really helps the amazing fungal diversity that we have down there. And then there's a few other spots that are, not as well known. There's Mount Graham right there in the southeast corner. And this is the Bradshaw Mountains outside Prescott, where I grew up. It tends to be kind of rugged country and not super wet, but some years it produces some good mushrooms. Last spring 2019, it had a really nice flush of mountain blonde morels, Morchella tridentina, that we did well on up there. So it's worth knowing. Okay, let's see. So we talk about this on our Facebook page a little bit every year to try and keep people safe, but we have really violent weather. We get flash floods. People are killed, or sometimes they're not killed, but are lucky to escape with their lives, and their vehicles go miles downstream because they drive into a flash flood or get caught by a flash flood. We have terrible dust storms. We have severe thunderstorms with lightning danger up on the high country. So you really need to be aware of what it's like when you're out in the backwoods, because you're a long way from medical care. You're a long way from transport. It can be a dangerous place. And then this kind of points up just how crazy the weather can sometimes be. These sort of, they call them a chubasco in Spanish. These thunderstorms will come in and they will absolutely dump, inches of rain in an area a few miles wide, and then the place, 2 miles distant from it won't get a drop. And so we kind of have to watch our weather maps here more than if you're, say, hunting in Pacific Northwest or something like that. We really need to be storm chasers and figure out where the rain has come and go there.
Alicia on the chat says, that storm sure looks like a mushroom, Chris.
Doesn't it? Yeah, that was one of the reasons I wanted to show it. I love this picture. It's so dramatic. And, I remember seeing this on the TV news, and they said, this area down in the Southwest Valley got like 3 inches of rain in 30 minutes. And then the rest of us got nothing. So, and this phenomenon, it shows up better down in the deserts, but the phenomenon happens up in the mountains too. So, that's kind of what you have to do, is see where the storm tracks have been, take a real close look at the radar, and go and follow the storms. And then, the dust storms, this isn't really a problem where we hunt mushrooms normally, but this is one, a haboob, as they're called, rolling into Phoenix a few years ago. And there's really dramatic weather phenomena that we have here. And then this is the San Francisco peaks in the summer monsoon season outside Flagstaff. And, you can see the rain. And again, the peaks are probably dry, bone dry right now. And we're between us and them, they're getting rain and thunder and lightning. And so you really got to be aware of the lightning danger. And if you want to go on our Facebook page, on American Mushroom, or Arizona Mushroom Forum Facebook group, we have one of our members, Kevin Widner, is a really knowledgeable, on storm safety and everything. If you search for posts by him, you can find a lot of really, really good advice about staying alive out in the woods. Okay, let's see. I think that'll bring us up. Let's see. So we already showed this one, I think. So we get this high elevation precipitation, and it happens every year. We get the storms typically coming from the south or southwest, and as they get up towards the high country, towards the Mogollon Rim and the Sky Islands and all the other mountainous terrain, they get lifted up. It's called orographic lift. The temperature falls and cold air is not as able to maintain humidity as warm air. And so it's like squeezing a sponge. And just as it pops up over the Mogollon Rim, it just squeezes out all that water, thankfully. And so, again, and this is what we get. And then on the far side of that uplift, you get the rain shadow. And that's why northwestern Arizona, the Navajo Reservation and Hopi Reservation are such high desert and so dry. It all gets squeezed out over the central mountain belts. And so you end up with a rain shadow on the lee side of the.
Is this what happens in both the winter and the summer, or is this just the monsoon?
This is more a summer phenomenon than winter phenomenon. The storms in the winter, they tend to be a lot bigger, and they get sort of established off the coast of California, the old Pineapple Express, it's blowing in from Hawaii and the Aleutian Islands and everything. And so you have much larger storms, and they rain or snow everywhere in the state. But I think it still explains part of why they get so much snow in places like the Mogollon Rim and White Mountains.
Yeah, because we get a similar pattern in Colorado too, of course. And it seems like it has to start. It's like a catch-22. It needs moisture to start itself up. When it's real dry, it just never happens.
Yeah. I think, in biology, they find that a lot of diversity in life happens at transition zones along the shore of, along the coast and places where there's a sharp transition from one kind of habitat to another. And that's where life really finds its niches and is very diverse. And I think that's kind of what happens here. So, so let's see. So what that means is that our biomes, our life zones really change. People ask me, does elevation matter? And I say, yeah, it matters, but it's kind of secondary. When you're hunting mushrooms, there's other things that are more important. You're looking for, first of all, the mycorrhizal partners of the substrate, that it grows on. If it's a mycorrhizal species, the trees that grow there, and then if it's a saprobic or parasitic species, there needs to be the right kind of wood or dead wood or whatever for it to grow on. So if you don't have that, you're not going to find mushrooms. And then the next thing is water, moisture. And it doesn't matter how high or low you are. As we said, the Navajo Reservation is very high. There's 7,000 foot plateaus all over northwestern Arizona where there's nothing really but some, sagebrush and maybe, if you're lucky, some pinyon and juniper, PJ forest. So the altitude doesn't really help there. And then there's places, the riparian zones in the desert that are lush and green, and mushrooms grow there, even though, there's cactus and rattlesnakes all around you once you get away from the streams. And then the third thing is the temperature. So that depends to some extent on elevation, obviously. But, the temperature fluctuates wildly in Arizona between summer and winter. So the elevation, it's not really critical there. At some point during the year, you're going to have the right temperature for mushrooms if you have the other ingredients. And then, and then the fourth thing is just pure dumb luck and the blessings of heaven, or maybe I should say hard work, finding where they grow. So that's it in a nutshell. Yes, elevation matters, but it's not the whole story.
Because it's elevation, temperature, precipitation, and
habitat.
The habitat was the first thing.
Habitat is first, precipitation second, and temperature's third. And then everything else takes a back seat to that, other than your hard work, I guess. So so we start down in the Sonoran Desert here. We go up through the sort of chaparral and oak woodlands. We get up into the oak pine woodland, and just below that is the PJ forest, as we call it. Pinyon juniper is right up here above the chaparral. then the oaks and pines like up around Prescott and Payson, and then pure Ponderosa pine as you get a little higher up around Flagstaff. And then you get into the Canadian or Hudsonian zones where these are the real mixed conifer. You get fir, spruce, various kinds of pine. We have several species, and it's really green and lush and wet, and that's where we see the biggest explosion of our fungal diversity there.
What is the elevation range for that Ponderosa band?
The Ponderosas start, you sometimes see them down around 5,000, 5,500 feet if they're on a north-facing slope or some sheltered place. Typically, they really get going above 6,000 feet, and they're probably at their thickest around 7,000 to 8,000 feet, like around Flagstaff. And then once you get up above 8,000 feet, then the firs really start to predominate, and there's still Ponderosas, but not as many. And then, above 9,000 feet, then it's really mostly fir and spruce. And so, with a few Ponderosas here and there on south-facing slopes, again, because of the lower, the different biome well, actually, this is a north-facing slope here, but on a south-facing slope here, the Ponderosas will be lower.
I didn't know that picture has a north and a south side, which makes...
Yeah, exactly. I should have been more diligent about pointing that out. These zones change. On a southern slope, they're a lot higher, and on a northern slope, they're a lot lower. But that said, to get the trees, you still need the water, and as you get down lower, the water is more and more marginal. So sometimes you still have to go over to the north side of the slope to find your pine tree or whatever. So yeah, so this is a good, and every morel hunter in Arizona has learned this within a day or two about how these different biomes work. If you start early in the season, you want it where the soil has warmed up already, and you're going to start looking on southern slopes. And if you find yourself on a northern slope, it may be too cold, there may still be snow there, while the morels are popping on the other side of the ridge where it's on the south. Then on the, as time goes on, most of our good morel hunting is on the north slopes over here because the moisture is held there longer, and the shade and everything helps keep it from drying out. And so if you're walking on the south side of the ridge and you find nothing, go over to the north side, or go east or west if you need a little warmth in the soil from the sun. So yeah, it may not be as explicitly lined out as this diagram makes it, but every experienced morel hunter knows this phenomenon. So, and then this is a vegetation map. And once again, we've got that same feature of the forested belt going across the state. And so, we start with all the yellow down in the desert. We get the scrub lands and chaparral. Then we get Great Basin conifer woodland. That's another name for the PJ forest, the Pinyon juniper forest. And there's massive amounts of that all over the state. And then you get a little higher, you get into the evergreen woodland, and these are oaks and some pines and manzanitas and various other, especially down south where there's a lot of oaks and a lot of interesting boletes that grow under them. Then we get into the montane conifer forest, and in the Arizona setting, in the Arizona context, we're talking about ponderosa pines. So again, kaibab, plateau, Flagstaff, Mogollon Rim, the lower elevations of the White Mountains, and then the higher elevations of the Sky Islands down in the southeastern part. And then our mixed conifer or spruce fir forest, that's at the highest elevations, Kaibab Plateau. There's a little bit along the Mogollon Rim that doesn't show up, the San Francisco Peaks here, and then a ton of it up in the White Mountains. And there's a little bit up in here like Mount Graham too. And again, it just follows the same thing as the rain and elevation maps I've been showing you. So let's go through some of these biomes, and then we'll start to talk about the actual mushrooms that grow there. So below 3,000 feet, most of our state is, the lower Sonoran Desert, and we've got creosote bushes and mesquite and various kinds of cactus, and there are mushrooms that grow here, and I'll show you a few, but they tend not to be good edibles, and they tend not to be very common, and they tend to be very ephemeral. They come after a big, heavy winter storm when things are cool in the desert and really sopping wet, and their whole life cycle may be 3 days. And then all you see is just an old, dried out, desiccated remnant of them. And then at any elevation, really, starting from the very lowest, you can get into these riparian zones, and those are very, very different than the desert around them. And you get cottonwood trees and sycamore trees and other green, lush life. Some of it's are really little Shangri-Las. And you can find morels as low. The lowest place I've ever found morels was up at Sunflower, Arizona, on the Beeline Highway. There's a creek. I can't remember if it's Rye Creek or some other creek that goes through there. And there's cottonwoods there, and it's like 2,000 or 2,500 feet. And I found them in, I think in March one year. So, that's low desert. I mean, it's hot in the summer there, but it's got morels in the winter, or early spring, I should say. You get a little higher, you get up around here. A lot of our people know this. This is the waterfall at Fossil Creek, one of the coolest places in the whole state. It's glorious here. And they've got morels in there too, and really lush habitat. Now we're up in the PJ forest, Pinyon Juniper Forest. This is outside Sedona, and it's kind of deserty, but it's remarkably got some mushrooms, and we find, most years we find morels in this habitat. And I'll show you some. So this is up above, sort of starting around 3,000, 3,500 feet, getting up to 6,000, 6,500 feet in places like Sedona and outside Payson, and on the way up to the White Mountains in some of the habitat there. And then we talked about those sort of evergreen woodlands down in southern Arizona. This is where they have a lot of oaks, manzanitas, various other hardwoods, a few pine trees too, as you get higher. I think this is a picture of Madeira Canyon, if I'm not mistaken. And we have some really cool mushrooms that grow down there. And it's kind of a hike for a lot of our people to get there. And again, it's very ephemeral. You have to time it very well with the rainfall, but you can find some very cool stuff. And I'll show you some of those in a minute. Then we get a little higher. Now we're in the Ponderosa and oak. We have various kinds of oak, Gamble's oak and Emery oak and white oak and various others. And it grows together with the Ponderosas. And this is where we really start to get into our productive habitat in the summer, when we're finding lobster mushrooms, we're finding Barrows boletes, we're finding Caesar's amanitas and stuff. This is where they really start to show up, and a bunch of other kinds too as well, Swillis and you name it. And then get up even higher, and now we're up in the mixed conifer forest, the sort of Canadian fir spruce forest. And this is up in the White Mountains. This tends to be up above 8,000 feet, and this is our really top habitat. And in places it looks very much like Colorado. We just lack the really steep, rugged terrain as much. It's mostly gentle terrain where we find our.
That sounds like a benefit, frankly. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, it's easy hunting, exactly. Along the Mogollon Rim, it can be really flat. And same up here. There's a lot of places where, it's just an easy stroll in the woods. You don't gain 200 feet in a mile of hiking. So, okay, so that's the biomes. Let's talk about what grows there. So we get down in the low desert, and most of the mushrooms that grow here have a very specific lifestyle. They are tolerant of dry weather. The secotioids, that's a cognate of the Spanish word seca, meaning dry. So these are dry country mushrooms, and typically they don't have any exposed hymenophore. That means they don't have any pores or gills or teeth of the spore-bearing surface that's out there shedding spores, you know, all day long. Instead, they are covered with sort of vestigial gills that never open up. The, you know, the veil covering the gills never really opens, or they don't have any gills or true hymenophore at all. They're a gleba. They're like a puffball, and they form a spore mass. And over time, they dry out in place, and you end up with this desiccated spore mass that disintegrates over the following year. And it's probably an adaptation that basically allows spores to be shed all year long, in hopes that, you know, the 3 days per year that there's enough moisture there for them to take, you know, to sporulate, they'll have a chance at it. You know, when you're up in the White Mountains, things are not that dire, and anytime, you know, the mushroom grows, it can drop spores and probably be sure of reproducing. So some of the ones we have is the desert shaggy mane, or Podaxis pistillaris. And some of our members have eaten this one. It's not a bad edible. There are places around the world, I think in like South Asia, Pakistan, Arabian Peninsula, they eat this one, and you find it in markets. And if you get it before it dries out, it's said to be not a bad edible. And they're pretty common. I've found them in my own front yard here at my house in Scottsdale. And but I have never found a fresh one. They're always already dried out. Even the one that was in my yard had already, or I found two in my yard actually. They had already turned to a nasty brown spore mass like this, and was completely desiccated.
Do they deliquesce like the shaggy mane?
Do what?
Do they deliquesce or whatever that, you know, turn into goo? Like the shaggy
No, they don't deliquesce. They turn into this brownish powder you see here.
Okay.
So they're not like a regular shaggy mane. They don't turn to liquid goo. They turn to dry powder. And
this is one of the secretoids?
Yeah, exactly. This is interesting because David Aurora has experimented with and Chad Hyatt and those guys on the West Coast. They like shaggy manes that are deliquesced, and they make all sorts of interesting stuff with them, like black pasta noodles and black risotto and stuff like that. And I've had it. I've had what Chad has made, and it's awesome. And so Aurora last year decided to experiment with one of these, and they actually made some kind of a sauce out of this spore mass of one that he and Wendy found. And they said it was really pretty tasty. I haven't dared to try that, and I don't recommend it, but it's something to think about. So
those two people certainly expand our horizons on
don't they ever? Yeah, yeah.
What we can eat and how to eat them.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's really cool. I mean, I'm eating stuff thanks to Chad that I never would have dreamed I would, and loving it. So yeah. There's some other ones. Tulostoma. This grows in the sandy areas. You can tell it by this pore or stoma right here at the top of the spore mass. This is Bateria phalloides. This is one of our real common desert species, and you know, they form again a spore mass at the top. It looks like cinnamon. It's actually powder that comes off it after it's dried out, and it looks for all the world like cinnamon. And those are fairly common. Fabian found this one down around Tucson somewhere. And then this one's Montanea arenicola. And arenicola means living in sand. And you can see right here, this is what you find in the sand dunes. Probably find it over at Glamis and places like that in Southern California too. Not edible. This one is called Agaricus deserticola. So deserticola again, meaning living in the desert. And this also grows definitely down at lower elevations, sort of a fall, winter, spring kind of a mushroom. It used to have a totally different name. It was Longula texensis. And the feature of this isn't a puffball. This one actually has gills, but these are kind of rudimentary gills, and this partial veil that covers them never opens up and lets the gills shed spores. So instead, it is one of these psychotioids that sort of dries in place and releases, has the dried out spore mass that's releasing spores all year long. I know a couple of people who said they've tried this one and it's actually a decent edible. So if you find it in the really fresh state, I don't necessarily recommend it, but if you're adventuresome and you want to try nibbling a little bit and seeing if it suits you and agrees with you, that's one of the ones you can find in the desert in the winter.
So the secretoid is really an adaptation that different genuses will make to survive in the desert. It's not a genus itself.
No, not at all. And they used to call these gastroid fungi, but that ends up being what's called a polyphyletic description of it encompasses a lot of organisms that are not closely related. And all of those organisms have other organisms that they are more closely related to that don't look anything like it. So it's like putting, bats and hummingbirds and butterflies all in one sort of category because they all have wings. Well, no, that's an example of convergent evolution to an adaptation. And so that's what they've had, and that's why since DNA came along and helped us do this differentiation much more carefully, we find, oh, wait a minute, so that puffball is more closely related to the agaricus, or that truffle is more closely related to the bolete, or whatever. It's not, and they've got nothing to do with each other. So gastroid as a term is kind of deprecated, and I think if you're talking about the low desert fungi that sort of disintegrate in place, I think this is probably preferred terminology. I may be using it incorrectly but that's what I'm trying to talk about, is the stuff like this that disintegrates in place. This one here is the dog turd fungus, or Pisolithus tinctorius. And the lithus refers to these little stones, stone-like things I think that's called the peridium, and that are part of the spore mass. And then tinctorius here is cognate with our word tint, and that means that this is a dye mushroom. And this can be used to make various colors of fabric dye. So it's pretty worthless for eating, obviously, but a lot of our members are getting into dyeing fabrics and textiles, and so this is something that's worth keeping an eye open for. When we get into the riparian zones, we start to get more interesting culinary stuff. This is Terry Clemence's photograph of some oyster mushrooms that she found in cottonwood, on some dead cottonwood stump. And we kind of tend to call these winter oysters. They tend to be brown or olive, gray. They're darker than our summer oysters. They're tasty. I don't think they're quite as tasty as the summer oysters, but they're a good edible. And after the warm rains in the low desert and intermediate elevation riparian zones, places like Camp Verde, Cottonwood, Cornville, and even up in Prescott, and anywhere there's a riparian zone where the cottonwoods grow, and that's a lot of places in Arizona, you're liable to find these in the winter. So, I never go out in the winter with the expectation of finding mushrooms. They're more rare than that, but sometimes I'm out in the desert for some other reason, I'm quail hunting or something, and I run across them. So,
hey, Chris, before you go to the next mushroom, Tricia had a question about the dog turd mushroom.
Yes.
What color does that make?
I believe it makes a brown or rusty brown or orange color. I don't know. I'm not very experienced with that. But various mushrooms can make just amazing, a whole rainbow of colors.
Yeah.
It's really quite remarkable. I never would have guessed before I learned about it, just in recent years. So
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's see here. And then you start to get some curious bracket fungi that are growing on dead wood. You can start to see the first turkey tails and foamies and sterium. This is, what one is this? Isn't this Pycnoporus cinnabarinus, I think? This really beautiful orange color one that I found growing on a dead pinyon pine. There's quite a lot of them. There's ones in like the Phalenus that are specific for mesquite trees down in the desert. And, you know, some people look for these for medicinal purposes, and you don't have to go far to find bracket fungi. You know, they're here in the desert anywhere there's trees. Then this one, it just looks like a, you know, a lump of rocks in the desert, but this is actually a really good edible. And if you find one of these in a fresh condition before the bugs get to it, you've really got yourself something special. This is Agaricus bitorquis, or torx, and I'm pretty sure this is Terry Clements's picture too. Once you dig them up, you can see that they are Agaricus. They're just like your grocery store mushrooms, very similar, but the difference, look very closely right here. Let me get my flag. Right here, this is the ring, and the bitorquis means two rings. And you can see that it's kind of a doubled ring, and you don't see that on most of the other Agaricus. There's one or two other species that have it, but this is the one that we have here. And this is a really, really savory, good edible. I've only had it once. The bugs like it too, so you got to get to it earlier. You got to have a high threshold for being disgusted by fungus gnats in your mushroom. And these things, they grow in hard-packed soil in the middle of the desert. And you know, sometimes the only clue that they're there is a big crack in the soil. And if you look down, you'll see the cap of the mushroom an inch underground starting to crack it. These things can lift pavement and concrete and crack foundations. Just, I've read they can have over 1,000 PSI of turgor pressure, as it's called, just from the moisture inside them. And they can be extremely destructive on roads and stuff. So yeah, keep an eye out for those ones after winter rains in the desert. Then there's one, I don't have a picture of it, and that's because almost nobody has a picture of it. There's an old black and white, a crummy old black and white picture of it that's in David Aurora's big book, Mushrooms Demystified. And he asked me to ask everybody who hunts mushrooms in Arizona to keep an eye out for this Pinyon agaric, or Agaricus pinyonensis. It looks like most other Agaricus, but it grows in the PJ forest after a heavy sort of fall or spring rain when the temperature is suitable. And it's said to be a good edible. I've never seen it, never tasted it. But if you are lucky enough to find this particular mushroom, you will almost certainly be published in Aurora's next revision of Mushrooms Demystified. He wants a good quality color picture of it and a vouchered specimen. So if you find it, make sure you dry it and save it and submit it to an herbarium or send it directly to Aurora along with some good pictures.
I think we lost a couple of attendees there. I think they just bolted out to the nearest pinyon forest to look for that.
There you go. And they might be out right now, even as we speak. I mean, the Tonto Forest under the Mogollon Rim around Payson, they've had more rain than the rim itself up on higher elevations, and they're probably growing there right now if you know where to look.
Hey, can we do a quick sound check, Chris? I got a message from one of the someone in the audience, Christina. She was having a hard time hearing. Suggested maybe lean closer to the microphone. Let's just check in with the everyone else.
I can do that. And is that better? Is anybody able to do a thumbs up or anything?
I got a few I can hear fine. So
okay.
I'm hoping Christina can hear fine too.
Maybe Christina's got to fix her settings or something. I don't know.
I don't know. But it sounds, everybody says you do sound better that way.
Okay, I'll
Eric,
try to stay a little closer.
I knew somebody was going to do it. Eric asks the obvious question. How can you find it if you don't know what it looks like?
Well, think of a grocery store button mushroom like you've had 1,000 times, and look for it growing under a juniper tree or under a pinyon tree.
There you go.
And so Pinyon Pine is, they're in the juniper forest, or, what we colloquially here call cedars, even though they're not really cedars, they're shaggy bark junipers. But when you're in the Pinyon forest, you'll find the pine trees with the little short needles and the small cones are the Pinyon pines. And so it'll be growing under one of those.
There you go. Okay.
Okay. Everybody still hearing me okay? Let me know, let Trent know if you're not, okay?
We're doing good.
Okay, so here's the other thing that we find in these riparian zones, and then in the PJ forest, as we get a little higher, are various kinds of morels. And the ones that we mostly find are the yellow morels. This is, I think, somewhere around Cottonwood or Camp Verde. With the Morchella Americana. There's another one that looks rather similar called Morchella prava that grows here. And then when you get a little higher, you get up into the PJ forest and you're around Sedona area, and you'll find these ones that we believe to be Morchella tridentina. They have a kind of a yellow-brown color. They're a little darker than for the most part, than the yellow morels down along the cottonwoods. These grow specifically, or most conspicuously, under Arizona cypress, which is a unique tree. You can learn to recognize it really easy because it has the bark that peels off, very papery bark that peels off in long strips. I think I have a picture of it here. Let's see. Yeah, so here we go. So this is the Arizona cypress tree. And this picture was taken about 3 miles as the crow flies from downtown Sedona, maybe even a little closer. So and these Arizona cypress, they form these very gloomy little thickets in low-lying ravines. You go up there and you think, oh, I'm in the desert, really. And then you get in these little gloomy cypress thickets, and all of a sudden there's moss, and then there's morels, and you're like, you're kidding me. And they're never very numerous, but some years when it's been a wet winter, you can go out around Sedona, Soldier Canyon or Dry Creek or, gosh, what are some of the other places? There's a bunch of places there. Anywhere you find a ravine like this with Arizona cypress and green moss and some water, and you'll probably find enough to get a dinner out of it, if nothing else, if there's been a good wet winter. Some years they don't come at all. I think 2017 they never came at all because the winter was so dry. But that's a cool one to find. Then you get up.
Can you go back? I had a quick question for you.
Yes, certainly.
On the kind of Latin of that last one.
That
Why
one?
is it CF Morchella tridentina?
Well, because I wasn't sure that it's the same species as tridentina. Because we also have, I was just about to talk about that. We have the mountain blondes that grow, once we get a little higher, we've been calling them tridentina, and I'm pretty sure that Terry Clements has sequenced them and found that they're tridentina. They're a little browner and a little less blonde than the mountain blondes that we've been calling tridentina that grow under Pinyon Pine. So I should probably take out. CF means confrere or compare with Morchella tridentina.
Okay, so that's kind of, you think it, that's like, you think that's what it is.
It's similar, but when I made this presentation a few years ago, I wasn't 100% certain that they were Morchella tridentina because they looked a little different than the mountain blondes that we find other places.
Okay.
And but apparently they're the same species. And let me go ahead because I was just about to talk about the Ponderosa Forest. And those mountain blondes, they grow in the Ponderosas and mixed conifer forest at a little higher elevation. You get up around 7,000 feet and you'll start to find some. I found quite a lot around Prescott in the Bradshaw Mountains last year. They weren't everywhere, but when you get into a little patch, actually the one who found them and showed me where to look was Ian Stone. So if you can make friends with him, he might take you to his patch. Or at least
Now, are you showing, I'm not seeing a picture of that right now.
Let's see. I don't have a picture of those. I need to add it to this, and I never got around to it. But I'll do it the next time I give this. Anyway, once we do get up into the Ponderosa Forest, and we also have a lot of oaks, especially gamble oaks, and we have a lot of aspens, and now we start to get some really iconic species that are really well known in Arizona. and really popular for the table, and are well worth picking up if you can find them. These are the Sun Caesar, or the Southwestern Caesar's Amanita, and these are very similar to the true Amanita caesaria of Europe. In fact, of all the American Caesar's Amanitas, these are probably the closest to that species that's extremely desirable. You know, the Italians, they call these ovuli, or eggs, and they love them. They pay ridiculous prices for them when they come out. Here you can pick them by the wheelbarrow load when they're really fruiting in say, up on the Mogollon Rim. There can be very, very common mushrooms, and they're pretty good edible. And I'll show you in a minute how to recognize them, because, you know, being in the Amanita genus, you do not want to mistake them for something else in the same genus that might kill you or injure you rather badly. Yeah, you can cook them. They get a little bit of a fishy taste when they're cooked. Now, I take them, I sometimes cook them and I add them to take out Chinese food, you know, shrimp lo mein, and they're great. You know, the fishy taste is fine. You know, if you don't like that, then I would suggest instead doing it the way the Italians do and making a crudo salad or raw salad. You know, clean them well, slice them thin, and put some olive oil, sea salt, and maybe a bit of vinegar or lemon juice on them, and shave a little Parmesan over them. And it's a really tasty, you don't get a fishy taste at all. You have a nice mild mushroom flavor from them. And that's a really popular appetizer in Italy when these things are popping. So to identify them, let's see, I thought I had some more pictures of those. I think I do have a little bit further. Now this is my current obsession. This is the Aspen, or it's an Aspen Amanita. There's another one called the Aspen Amanita that's a little different, similar to this, but this is the one that I really am interested in. This is Amanita Barozii, also named for Chuck Barrows, who's that famous amateur mycologist whose name I borrow for use on Facebook and stuff, where I don't want to use my own name for privacy. Anyway, he's the one that first sort of noticed that there were these really tasty little amanitas. These are in Amanita section vaginate, so it's a grisette. And if you notice, look closely here, there's no ring here, and it's got a really striated edge. So let me grab my marker. So no ring, striated edge of the cap margin, all those little grooves there, and then a really fairly thick vulva. And if you look very closely here, it has a sort of an orange or peach colored or mother of pearl colored lining on the inside of the vulva. And that's a key diagnostic or identification feature of this species. And these are delicious. I think these are the best tasting mushroom I've ever had. They're definitely not for beginners. This is a white gill Amanita, so it's experts only. But if you've had Amanita villosa, the sort of springtime sweet Amanita that they get over in California, this one is said to taste very much like it. It's actually sweet. They're just fantastic. The first time I ever had this was actually in Utah. I was up on Boulder Mountain with David Aurora, and he was really delighted to find some, and we picked them. And I wouldn't have dared to eat him if I wasn't at his elbow, but I did, and I loved them, and I've always tried to grab them anytime I can find them since then. So an interesting one that you will find in the aspen groves when the conditions are right. Here's the Barrows bolete, Boletus Barozii. This is our white king bolete. For a long time, it was just considered a color variant of Boletus edulis, you know, the regular porcini or sep. And then Chuck Barrows, he figured out this is actually a different species. I think he and Smith, the famous mycologist Smith, who I think was in Chicago or something, they figured out this is its own species. And so it was named Boletus Barozii. If you look very closely, you'll see it has the white netting at the top of the stem. And that means it's a member of the Boletus edulis group, and it's a good edible. That's the key distinguishing feature for these. And then it's kind of a grayish white or tannish white cap. And this is an excellent edible. It's every bit as good as any other porcini. And when you find these in good shape before the bugs have got to them, this is a really, really big prize. Everybody loves these. Lobster mushrooms, just like the one you found. This is actually a mushroom growing on a mushroom, sort of. It's a parasite, and Hypomyces lactiflorum, and it's more closely related to the morels than it is to the mushrooms it grows on, but it's growing on the mushroom that provides the sort of framework for it and is parasitized is mostly Russula brevipes in this area, kind of the white Russula that gets infected with this hypomyces and goes through the process of hypomycetization. Now these are really robust, firm mushrooms. They have a nice, bland, mild texture. They're not strongly flavored. I'm sorry, they have a bland flavor, but they have a really firm texture. And so they're really, really good for things like Asian cooking, where you have a stir fry and you want the mushrooms for texture, and you don't necessarily need them in a, to add flavor to the dish. They'll just soak up the flavor of whatever you put them in with. The other thing about these is, they're slam dunk easy to identify because they don't have any gills left. They just have some vague ridges where the parasite is taken over. But they tend to grow underground and they tend to be filthy dirty. And, sometimes the only ones you can find, you actually have to dig up out of the ground, and they're a chore to clean. Most of the time when they're fruiting, they're really common and you don't have to do that. You can pick the pretty specimens like this that are growing above ground, and you don't have to stoop to digging up the nasty, dirty ones. But sometimes you do. And when you do, my recommendation is to use a really stiff scrub brush, a garden hose, and a potato peeler. And the potato peeler will make short work of the really dirty, filthy parts of it without losing a lot of flesh. So
yeah, that's how we did it too. A really good stiff brush, like the kind you clean your fingernails with. We had a good question on that from Lauren. She wants to know, do lobster mushroom parasite that hypomyces ever infect anything poisonous?
The dogma on that has always said that even if they infect a Russula species that would otherwise upset your stomach, they don't, they replace that species and break down the cell contents into other compounds. And so nobody has ever shown that there's any danger of getting sick from whatever compounds in like Russula Americanum or whatever are making people sick. The lobster mushroom completely replaces it. The old mushroom, the Russula, typically is just a scaffold. And this particular hypomyces does not infect anything except the Lactarius and Russula. I think they're called Russulales. It's I think an order or something of mushrooms that includes the Lactarius and the Russula. It doesn't infect like a death cap or something like that. You'd never find this on a death cap. It's only those particular Russula. And in Arizona, as far as we know, the only one it infects is Russula brevipes, which, by the way, is a pretty good edible by itself, even if it hasn't been hypomycetized. Aurora has done some blind taste tests with Russula brevipes, and they actually beat the lobster mushroom. So fancy that. All right. So yeah, these are real common, and sometimes when they're really fruiting, I was out with Kevin Widner one time on the Vernon McNary Road east of Pine Top, and we got into where you'd find 50 of them in an area the size of your living room. It was just incredible. If we'd had all day, we could have filled the bed of our pickup truck. Just incredible proliferation. And sometimes they're like that around Flagstaff too.
Have these started out for you yet this year in Arizona? Have any of these kind of shown up yet?
I don't think anyone has found any in Arizona yet. Our monsoons were just so late that first you got to grow the Russula brevis, and then you got to grow the Hypomyces. And so it takes a while to develop. So they tend to come along a little later. They tend to stick around a long time too. I've found them in October before. So, if the rains continue, you'll find these.
You need a couple of weeks of rain, don't you, to kind of get everything?
You need 2, 3, 4 inches and then a couple of weeks of warm weather before stuff really gets rocking. Yeah, we're right on the cusp of it. I expect that we'll see our first bolete in lobster mushroom any day now.
Okay. Alicio is confirming no russulas or russulas, I don't know how you say it, or russulas in Arizona are deadly poisonous either, right?
Correct. That's as far as we understand. There are a few russulas that grow, I think, mainly in Japan and East Asia that are considered, potentially deadly. But as far as we know, we don't have any of them here. And there are some that will upset your stomach here. They all have a spicy taste.
Yeah.
If you just taste a sample of them, and it's really not. If you sit there and chew on it and go, gee, I wonder if this is really spicy. It's not really spicy. When you get a spicy one, you will know it. You absolutely will know it. You will not have to ask yourself if
yeah. And if you chew on it a little bit, you'll be trying to get that flavor out of your mouth for hours.
For hours, yeah. You'll be taking water and rinsing and spitting it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Beth confirmed that. Hours. Sounds like she's done it. In fact, it's a good practical joke to play on people occasionally. Taste this one. It's a little spicy.
You may not get a second chance to do that. They may not go mushroom hunting with you again. Okay. So let's see. Moving on here, then the scaber stalks. So
I'm sorry, we just had one more question from Ray Lee. Is the spiciness of russulas an indicator of ones that will upset your stomach?
Yes, that's correct. If they're spicy, they are likely to upset your stomach. Although that said, in Eastern Europe, Russia in particular, the Russians pick russula indiscriminately.
Yeah.
But they typically don't eat them fresh. Instead, what they do is they either salt them or pickle them, brine them or something. And they pile them up with salt for months at a time, and then they have them in the winter. And I think there's some sort of fermentation or chemical reaction or something that makes it so that they don't suffer any bad consequences of it. Or maybe they just have goat stomachs in Russia and they don't care. So, here, if it's spicy, we advise you to avoid it. We have a lot of good edible russulas. We have the Russula brevis that we talked about that grows the lobster mushroom. We have green and yellow ones of various kinds, Russula luteus, I think it is. And I had a really nice dish that Chad Hyatt made with that one. And these are things that most people just turn up their nose at, won't even stoop over to pick, if other stuff is fruiting. But, sometimes we don't have that luxury. Sometimes we have to take what we get. And if you get a yellow-capped russula, you can make some really delicious stuff out of it. Anyway, moving on to the scaber stalks. The scabers are these little black tiny scales that stick up from the surface of the stem of the lexinum. And so these things can look very similar to a porcino, and they are a bolete. They're just not in the genus Boletus. They're in Lexinum, and they tend to have more of a dry, sort of fibrous cap and not such a shiny, smooth cap. And then they have the scabers on the stalk instead of that white netting or reticulation, as it's called. These are pretty good edibles for the most part. Some people don't like them because they tend to turn a really nasty dark black or dark gray color when you cook them. But they're pretty good. I think they're great. I keep dried ones around and I throw them into, like, if I'm making beef stew or lamb stew or something like that, where you don't really notice the color. They're great. They also do very well pickling. They're fairly firm when you pickle them, and they taste good. So yeah, these are, and we have probably 5 or 6 different species. There's Lexinum insignia. There's Lactarius vulpinum, there's Lactarius montanum, Lactarius ponderosa. There's all these different ones. They may be orange, they may be sort of brick red, they may be maroon or mahogany. They vary in color. But as far as we know, all of them in Arizona are edible. And nobody, Bill Warner goes around asking people if they've had any upset stomach from the Lactarians, and he's asked over 100 people. And I think he still has not found anybody who's ever suffered serious illness after eating a Lactarian in Arizona. Now, that's not the case further north. If you get up northern Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, apparently there's some variety of Lactarian that grows up there that some people have pretty serious reaction to. But down here, that doesn't seem to be the case.
We had a friend that when we were very, very first hunting that went out with us, and we went with somebody else that knew more than us. And we picked these and took them home, and we were going to eat them. And our friend called and said she was totally sick from eating them, like throwing up bad, missed a couple days of work. And we haven't had them for years, and ran into her, I don't know, a while back, and that came up, and she talked, yeah, I did it, and I sliced them onto my salad, and we were like, whoa, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
She got sick one, but she ate them raw, which doesn't really comply with the rules anyway. So it's hard to say if it was a bad one or not. So we might have to reconsider that ourselves.
Oh gosh, there are so many mushrooms that are considered good edibles that will upset your stomach if you eat them raw.
Mm-hmm.
And and the most obvious one being morels. The biggest mushroom poisoning ever was a dinner that was given up I think in British Columbia, maybe a decade ago. And the chef served raw morel salad, which by all accounts was delicious, but 70 odd people went to the hospital with gastrointestinal illness. And most people, I have trouble with grocery store mushrooms if I don't cook them. I don't like white button mushrooms on a salad raw, and much less something wild that I pick in the forest. There's two exceptions to that. One is the porcini, a nice young firm porcini. Slice it raw, and again, put a little olive oil, sea salt on it. That's good, and I think it's very well tolerated. Almost anyone can eat that. And then just make sure it's clean, and you're not picking raw things off it or something like that. And then the other one is the Caesar's Amanita, which is typically eaten raw. And that's also very mild on people's stomachs.
I thought you were going to say a second different one.
Which one?
I was thinking matsutake.
I've heard people eat matsutake raw. I never have. There's another one, but we don't have it as far as I know, and that's the beefsteak mushroom, the Fistulina hepatica. It looks for all the world like a liver growing out of a tree, or a steak growing out of a tree. I had it in Italy for the first time a couple of years ago. It's actually not a bad mushroom. It has kind of a lemony flavor, but that one is typically eaten raw too. But other than that, no, everything. Cook everything. Don't, and especially stuff like morels and Lactarium and oysters, even chanterelles. They have a reputation for causing a lot of GI, a lot of gastrointestinal distress if you don't cook them.
Yeah, and on that note, just for everyone, when you're trying new mushrooms, just go easy. Taste a little bit. Even a well-known mushroom that everybody eats, like morels, they could make you sick. And I say that as firsthand experience. I cannot eat morels. They make me throw up in a really major way. I hunt them like crazy, but my stomach objects to them immediately.
Yeah.
So.
And Bill Warner is like that. I believe he's not really able to eat morels any longer. I know another longtime member of the club, even before it was the Arizona Mushroom Society, Jim Pinter. I remember he, after the Wallow fire, I think he and his wife, they got into huge amounts of them, and I think he sensitized himself somehow. Sensitized himself by gorging on them. And for years after that, he couldn't eat them again. So
I think I did too, because I used to eat them as a kid. and he is even as a young adult. And now I cannot. And some people can't eat even like store-bought mushroom, like a shiitake
Yeah.
will impact some people.
There's a well-recognized allergy, shiitake dermatitis, that some people suffer from.
Yeah, we're getting a few people on chat confirming. Yeah, there's a lot of people with a story about a mushroom that they're allergic to. So I guess it's like any food. You know,
Yeah, it is.
These.
Yeah, you might be allergic to some kind of bean or some vegetable, whatever.
Yeah.
And
well, go ahead. I didn't mean to hijack you with like this.
No. It's worth talking about. And yeah, I think a couple others that are like that. Chicken of the woods is really well-known troublemaker.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, honey mushrooms, which I like, but some people have a hard time with them, and there's plenty of others too. So cooking them carefully is important, and then starting slow, like you say, and you know, I think we didn't really talk about this at the outset of the presentation, but I think we need to say this. You know, looking at these pictures and listening to us talk, that's not a substitute for actually identifying what the species of mushroom that you're eating is. You need to be confident what it is before you put it in your mouth. You need to, you know, if you can't key it out yourself, you need to be with someone who knows what it is and can confidently identify it.
You know how you know if that's you? Because you know the lookalikes. Like if you're confident that you know what this is, it's because you're confident it's not X, Y, and Z.
Right. Yeah. You know the chanterelles, and you know the three other things that look like chanterelles but are not chanterelles.
Right, and that's a big part of it.
Yeah. So that just comes with experience. And then starting slow. What we call in Arizona the Leathers test. Chet Leathers was our president of the Arizona Mushroom Club going back years and years and years. He's still on our board, and he holds the title of founding president emeritus. So he's still a respected member of our group, even though he doesn't do the day-to-day testing. But he put out a very specific protocol. I'll show you where you can find it a little later.
Yeah.
About testing, just starting basically by chewing it and spitting it out and seeing if you've got an allergy to it, and then taking, just half a spoonful, and then a little more and a little more, wait for a while after each time until, after 3 days of you've been nibbling on it, until you can eat a handful without any trouble. Then going forward, you can have that mushroom as much as you can hold, or, reasonably as much as you care to eat forever, for the rest of your life. But you got to do that test the first time to find out. Okay, let's see. Why don't we step it up here a little bit? Here's another one that is a real favorite that people are finding right now. This is Flammulina populicola. It grows on aspen. It's related to Flammulina velutipes that grows in other parts of the country. It's a very delicious edible. It has a really robust, nice flavor. This is something to put on a steak. It's really tasty. Some people pickle them. I think Mike Decter, his wife, pickled them. But they're a versatile and delicious mushroom. They're often really common, real easy to find. The only thing that you have to be certain of is distinguishing them from a couple of other wood-rotting mushrooms that are poisonous, most especially Galerina marginata, which is a deadly poisonous one that contains amatoxin, just like a death cap. So it's not hard. They have very different features. Galerina has rings. This one doesn't. Galerina shouldn't have the black velvety foot. It can be dark, but it shouldn't look like black velvet like these do. And then the spore print, if you're in doubt, just cut off all the stems, throw the stems away. They're no good to eat. Stick all the caps on a sheet of aluminum foil and look for a white spore print in the morning, and then you're good to go. Real good edible. Let's see, we've got various puff balls. Several people have found these already this year. The biggest one is the Calvatia buniana, the Western giant puff ball. And some of these can be, bigger than a basketball. They can feed 20 people, Some people like the flavor. I think it reminds me of melted cheese. I only like them if they're really super fresh. If they're starting to turn yellow at all, I won't touch them. I don't even really like them that much, but some people do. I've had other kinds that I like better. There's one called Calvatia Craniformis that looks like a skull. It's a crazy thing when you see it. It's the size and shape of a skull. And that one's actually, I've had it once and it was pretty good. And there's 3 or 4 others that grow here that are smaller. Let's see here. This one is one of our Lactarius. We have various species here. This one's Lactarius Indigo, which has got a beautiful blue color. And when you cut the gills or the cap, you'll see like blue milk come out. It's the craziest thing. So Lactarius is named for its, the way it lactates when you cut it, and it leaks milky substances of various colors, depending on the species. This one's a good edible. It's not real common, but we've found them plenty of times. And the Lactarius tend to be, they're a big favorite in Eastern Europe, where they pickle them usually, or they or preserve them in salt, or they put them on the grill and roast them fresh over a grill. And when you do it on a grill, on a flame, it tends to take away some of the grainy texture that they would otherwise have. Sprinkle a little salt, maybe olive oil on them, and they're really tasty. We have a few other species too. Here's one with some orange and then a greenish one. I think this one's Lactarius Barozii, and the name of the other one escapes me. As long as, just like with the russellas, as long as they're not spicy to the taste, they're likely to be edible and pretty good if you prepare them right. So there's a lot of different kinds that grow here. And if you want to know, ask Terry Clements. She knows them all.
Slow cook those to get the graininess out of them a little bit.
Yeah, the roasting on the fire seems to be a really good way to prepare them so that you don't get that sort of lumpy, grainy texture. Then we have various Harissium species. Those of you that were on the Mogollon Rim in 2017, I think that's when we found this one at our annual foray. I think this one's Harissium, I want to say no, it's not coralloides. I think this one's Harissium Americanum. And then there's Harissium coralloides that looks more like a branching coral. And then we also have Harissium erinaceus, which is the lion's mane or pom-pom mushroom. And I think Hernan Castro found one of those down along the San Pedro or somewhere just a few days ago. And all good edibles, all really desirable choice edibles. And pretty much foolproof for identification too. There's nothing poisonous that looks anything like this. Here's the other one, the Harissium erinaceum, I think it is. That's the pom-pom mushroom, lion's mane mushroom, monkey head mushroom, I've heard it called. And so these tend to grow on oaks. And I think the most that I've seen them has definitely been in the Mogollon Rim area. Here's one that people are finding right now. This is the giant sawgill, Neolentinus ponderosus. And you can see the serrated gill edges. This is one of the really distinguishing features of it. The other is that it's always growing on dead ponderosa pine stump. Even if it's coming out of the ground, it's growing on the dead roots of the stump. They tend to be large, big as a dinner plate sometimes. And this is an underappreciated edible. This is a good mushroom for the table. Like the lobster mushroom, it tends to have a bland flavor, but a really nice, firm, chewy texture. And you can use it in any recipe where they say you should use shiitake mushrooms. They're nice on the grill, paint it with a little soy sauce or,
Marination.
Marination, yeah. And they come out, they're one of the first good edible mushrooms that you see after the monsoon rains start. And they grow, with just a ½ inch of rain, and they'll start popping out of the ponderosa stumps everywhere that ponderosa pines grow. We found dozens and dozens of people have posted these already this year on our Facebook group. Yeah, they're a good one. And especially if you want to do stir fry sort of Asian cookery, fantastic, great mushroom for that.
We went out.
And then finally, the last of our habitats. Anyone got any questions or anything that we should address?
I got one for you here from Ray Lee. What's the difference between the abbreviation SP period and SPP period?
Oh, SP means one species. SPP means multiple species. That's all. And it means it's a particular species that you may or may not know. You just don't want to bother mentioning which species it is because you might be wrong. but it's related. It's closely, you're just saying, this is a, whatever, Lactarius species. It's understood, but not necessarily specified which one. Okay. So now we're getting into the mixed conifer forest.
You got one more question. I'm sorry. Is there anything that you need to know about when you're looking for sawgills that could be a dupe?
I'm not aware of anything other than actual shiitake mushrooms that have those serrated gills and grow on a ponderosa pine stump. They're pretty distinctive. They're pretty foolproof.
Yeah, those gills are, if you look at them, that's pretty unusual to have those jags across the edge of the gill.
Yeah. I am not aware of anything that anybody I know has ever mistaken for a giant sawgill and turned out to be something else.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Okay, so yeah, now we'll talk about the mixed conifer forest, and where we're starting to get in. We get typically white fir the further north you go, although it gets down pretty far south. We have some of it in the White Mountains. There's corkbark fir up north. The San Francisco Peaks has a lot of corkbark fir. Tends not to be a really good mycorrhizal partner. Douglas fir has a lot of good edibles that associate with it, and it's not a true fir, but it's similar. It's a hemlock, I guess. And then as you get even a little higher, as we mentioned before, you start to get into the spruce. And there's a real easy way. I don't know my trees that well, but I can distinguish a fir from a spruce. And the firs, or the Douglas fir that's not a fir, when you take the soft part of your palm, where your your lifeline or whatever is, and you take the needles and you poke that part of your palm, and the spruce is going to have sharp points and a triangular cross section of the needles, and it's going to hurt when you poke that part of your tender part of your palm. With a fir, the needles tend to have a more oval or flat cross section, and the tips are a little more rounded, so they're not quite so sharp and they're not quite so firm and needle-like. And when you poke that part of your palm, it doesn't hurt. And it's pretty distinctive difference between the two. I can recognize them now more or less. I can say that's a fir, that's a spruce. I may not know the exact species unless I can see a pine cone at a certain stage of development, or a spruce cone. But the needles are enough any time of year to distinguish between them. So that's there's a trick for you. Let's see. We still get a lot of ponderosa pines up in the mixed conifers. The higher we go, the fewer we get, and the more spruce and fir predominate. This is Locket Meadow up at northeast side of the San Francisco Peaks. Really nice place. A lot of species grow there. If you want to find Gyromitra montana, the snowbank mushroom, this is a good place to look right after snowmelt. They have various, as we call, natural morels that don't require a fire. They grow here, and a lot of other good species grow here. And you go all the way up into the inner basin, as it's called. This is sort of on the opposite side of the peaks from the ski area. They call this area the inner basin. And it's a little bit of a hike to get there. You have to earn your supper, but there's great mushroom hunting up there. And this really is the most productive zone we have by far as the actual fungal diversity and the number of edibles that we have. And so this picture was actually taken by Aurora when he was out here a few years ago. And he and Wendy and some of our other members, I think Beth Bilodeau was there, and a few others, were picking edible mushrooms for this picture. And I think they picked for like 2 hours over an area of 8 or 10 acres in the White Mountains. And they got it just at the right time, just the right fruiting at the peak of the fruiting. And I want to say there's like 22 different edible species, most of which I'm not even going to discuss today, but these are all edible species that they were able to pick in an area the size of, I wasn't there, so I don't know, but it was just a very brief pick. And so, you've got Romaria, coral mushrooms, you got Floccularia, you got Lactarius. This is Amanita cruatillamurum, or the blusher, also related to Amanita rubescens and Novinupta. I'm not sure what those are. Maybe a Laccaria.
Like
There's
lilac.
yellow russulas. There's cauliflowers, Phorassus. These look like Tricholoma equestri, the man on horseback it's called. These are like Sinum. These are Porcini. These are Boletus rubriceps, the red caps. That's probably oysters. Caesar's Amanitas here. Lobsters there. Chanterelles there. Barrows boletes here. And who knows what all else. I mean, they're just an absolute cornucopia of edible mushrooms. So when you hit it right, that's what it looks like. And I think in the next 10 days, we're going to see conditions like that. Hopefully, as the rains come back. Maybe not quite that good, but hopefully good. So this picture, he gave me permission. What's that?
Alicio asked, where's the pheasant backs?
Well, they might or might not be here. I don't know. I know they grow up there. I've picked them up there with Kevin Whitner before. But maybe one of these, maybe this one, that might be a pheasant back. I don't know. That mushroom is Polyporus squamosus, I believe, and called the pheasant back or the dryad saddle. And it's a decent edible. It's not, nobody considers it choice, but it's not bad, and sometimes it's the only thing.
We get them in the spring here with the morels, so probably
Yeah.
too earlier in the season than.
They tend to be a very early season mushroom that you might find them when you're looking for giant sawgills, but they'll have pores, not serrated gills, so they're easy to distinguish. So yeah, Aurora, David gave me permission to use this for presentations like this. He wouldn't give me the full resolution one because he says, I'm going to be using it a lot. I'm going to put it in my new book. It's going to be a major sort of color plate when he does the revision of Mushrooms Demystified. So you all got to see it before the new book came out. So let's look. We've got chanterelles here. This one is Cantharellus roseacanus, and they tend to be small. They tend to be almost a pinkish tinge on top. You have them in Colorado too. And most people who've tried them and compared them to there's 3 or 4 kinds that grow along the coast, on the West Coast. And some of them are pretty good, but most people say that the ones that we grow here in the Rocky Mountains, these Cantharellus roseacanus, they really beat they really whop the West Coast species for taste. Ours are really better. And they're not a super common mushroom, but it's rare that we have a summer where we don't find at least a few. And, you know, sometimes they can appear in pretty good numbers. This was on the east end of the Mogollon Rim. I'm not going to say where. Susanna Woodward knows where it is. But we did very, very well that day. And I had chanterelles for a long time. One thing I like about these is they're really robust as far as sticking them in a paper sack in the refrigerator. You know, 2 weeks later, they're like you just picked them. They last a long time. Some of the other mushrooms we pick are not like that, but these are. So they tend to like shady parts of the forest, and I think probably most common under Douglas fir. Shady, mossy places. I think I've found them mostly on areas of kind of flat ground where the water tends to accumulate and not really wash off. And so you get a very mossy, sort of soft, springy ground, and that seems to be where they like to pop out the most. Here's a real famous mushroom. This is Boletus rubriceps, the Rocky Mountain red-capped king bolete, or red porcini. We call them rubies here in Arizona. I don't know what you guys call them up there, but this is my favorite, you know, choice edible that's common here. I love these. I always have loved them. It was the first really good edible I found, and I hope at the end of my days, my last supper can be one of these. And
it's fun. It's a really forgiving mushroom. You can pick them small and big. You can dehydrate them. You can freeze them.
Yeah, they're so useful.
So easy to deal with as a forage.
Yeah, they dry beautifully and reconstitute. Even if they're full of nasty bugs, you can dry them out and grind them into powder.
And then give them away to your friends.
And, you know, put that in soup or in your omelet or whatever. It's great. Make porcini salt with them to go on steak, a steak rub, you know. Fresh, they're delicious. I talked about the salad that I love to make with them when they're really firm. You know, this one here probably erupted about 2 hours before I found it. It was bug-free. It was absolutely as firm as a potato. And I took it to my favorite Italian restaurant that night and gave it to the owner there, who was thrilled. I gave him I gave him probably a couple pounds of these, and he was really delighted. And so he took this one and he sliced it thin and made an Italian raw salad out of it for me, part of it, and it was so good. So that was at Casa Mia in East Scottsdale off Shea Boulevard and 136th Street. So if you find some good mushrooms, you want to take them there, they'll cook them for you. They won't buy them from you, but they'll happily accept them as gifts, and they'll happily cook them up for you. So.
And when you find these, you often find more than enough to share as well.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, they tend to be pretty common once they come out, and so versatile, so delicious. I just love them. They do best under spruce. When you're looking for these, look for spruce and look for the tree lines. We talked about how life really has, the diversity of life has an advantage where there's a transition zone between two different habitats. Well, these love the transition between the deep dark forest and the open meadow where the spruce grows. Sometimes they're 30, 40 feet out in the meadow, and there's one little knee-high baby spruce. I think they like the young spruce more than they like the old mature trees.
We find them there too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So find sort of a glade, and especially where the trees are on the south side and the open meadow is on the north side, so it's shaded from the afternoon sun. And look for little baby spruce along those tree lines, and sometimes you'll find 50 of them in walking half a mile.
Yeah,
it can be remarkable.
I think it's the Engelmann spruce that we find them with, that have those like pine cones that are like as big as your thumb, maybe a little bigger, a little thicker. So when you see those pine cones on the ground that are about that big and long and thin, that's often a good sign.
Yeah, that's porcini country for sure. They do grow, or a very closely related species grows under ponderosa pine too. And if you go on the Mogollon Rim, probably you find more rubriceps growing with pine than you do with, any other species.
Oh, you find rubriceps there with pine. That's cool.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. We think it's the same species. There's some question as to whether or not it's a different one that's closely related, but it's every bit as tasty. The stems tend not to be quite as fat, and it has more of a brownish color with a thinner stem and not quite as white. The stems are darker, but we think it's the same species. And we can find them in very large abundance. Now, some of that habitat was burned recently over by Baker Butte, but there was plenty of forest that didn't burn there. There's plenty of places to find these in the summer.
Lauren is asking if they always have those thick stems.
Not always, no. The ones that grow under ponderosa pines in particular tend to have a little bit narrower stems. They're still a pretty robust stem, and you'll still see, if you look close there, you can see that white reticulation on the stem there that's very characteristic of them. You'll still see that. It's still a fairly thick stem, but it's not the really big, fat, round, pudgy stems that you get in spruce country. I think it's probably a microclimate difference, something different about the moisture, the temperature, the nutrients it gets from the tree roots, or whatever the case may be. But they grow a little bit different there, but they're just as good. They're really, really good. And sometimes there's a certain road, I won't mention it, that goes north off the Mogollon Rim Road. Road 300 is the east-west Mogollon Rim Road. And there's a road that goes north from there where every time I've gone there in season, I have found dozens and dozens and dozens of these things growing under pine trees, especially little baby pine trees. Little spindly dog hair pine trees. Those little thickets can sometimes harbor a lot of these porcini. Okay, let's see. Let's move on. So this one's the hawkwing, Sarcodon imbricatus. This one's a foolproof identification. See the teeth on the bottom? They don't have gills and they don't have pores. They've got little fingers or teeth that hang down. And then on the top, it has almost like feathers. It has scales that are imbricated is the word. And so, they're raised a little from the cap surface. There are other Sarcodon, I think Calvatia or Sarcodon calva or something like that. and it looks very similar to this, but it's got a more gray tint, and it's smooth instead of imbricated on top. So it's and it's nasty. It's bitter. It won't do you any harm, but it tastes disgusting. But the Sarcodon imbricatus is, most people like the flavor of it. Some people find it, the flavor can be strong and a little bit bitter. Some people don't like it very much at all. But they have found that if you take these, slice them up and boil them for, 8 or 10 minutes before you use them in your recipe, that you can get rid of a lot of the nasty taste. And I like these quite a lot. I eat them when I, want to have something robust to go with a steak or something like that. Ribeye steak, they work really well for that purpose.
Yeah, we put them in tomato sauce quite often for that reason. They hold up well.
I wonder if the acid in the tomato sauce maybe helps to sort of leach out the nasty taste.
The other thing we do with them a lot, I have a lot of these, and I use my entire jar this winter, baking them into bread.
Uh-huh. Oh, that sounds interesting. Yeah.
It was a shocker how good it was, and I never thought I would eat that many hawk's wings, but we ate massive.
I've seen a few people baking mushrooms into bread lately. It seems to be an up-and-coming thing. I have to try it sometime. I'm not really a bread baker.
We went back. We tried a lot of different ways, and it was failure. It just didn't make good bread, and we did find one good way to do it, which involved fermenting the bread for an hour or for a day in a pot and then baking it. We put the recipe on our website on how we did it. We didn't make the recipe. We found it. But it's hard to make good mushroom bread. It just the mushroom flavor doesn't come out in the bread very well frequently.
You should trade tips with Mike Decter. He's the king of fermentation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, this one's really common. I've never been to a White Mountain foray in the summer where we haven't found hawkwings, and it's a decent edible, especially if you boil it to prepare it, and you can teach a 6-year-old kid to recognize it in about 5 minutes. So it's really safe for beginners. Let's see. We talked about the difference between summer and winter oysters. The summer oyster is, when it's growing on dead Douglas fir like this, it's Pleurotus pulmonarius. If you find it on aspen, dead aspen, it's usually Pleurotus populicula. Both of them are excellent edibles. I like them better than the darker winter oysters. I think this is my daughter's favorite mushroom. She likes these above all other edibles, and I've fed her probably 15 different choice edibles. This is the one she likes the best. So, and there tend to be fairly early fruiters once the rains come, like a lot of wood rotting species. They don't need to charge themselves up like the mycorrhizal species, like the boletes. They'll come along a few days after the rains fall. And if you find the right oyster log, you can sometimes fill your basket off one tree like this one. The other side of this log had just as many, if not more. And this is actually up on Mount Lemmon in outside Tucson, believe it or not. This is a very, very productive tree. I've been there a couple of times. And those of you who hunt up there probably know it. It's not very far from the parking lot where a lot of people go. So, but yeah, one of my favorites. Another thing we find a fair amount of everywhere we have Douglas fir is the reishi. Reishi is a Japanese term. In Chinese, it's lingjie. And to the scientist, it's Ganoderma tsuge. So Ganoderma means shiny skin. And the sort of common name for these is a lacquer conch or a lacquered bracket fungus. And you can see it has this shiny appearance that looks like lacquer. And then tsuge means growing on fir. Well, this is not a fir, this is Douglas fir. It's a hemlock, and so its genus is pseudotsuge. So it's a pseudo fir. But the pseudotsuge, Ganoderma tsuge, seems to like it just fine. And we find it frequently on the Mogollon Rim. There's a couple of places I know of where there are dozens of trees that are affected with it. Typically, if you find one place where this grows and you want to gather more, it's worth your while to look around the same area because they tend to spread among dead trees in a given area. And so within, a half mile of where I found this, there were at least a dozen others that had them. And these are also wood rotters, and they fruit very early. People are finding them already up on the Mogollon Rim. And some people consider them to have medicinal value. They've been used in traditional Asian medicine for 5,000 years. I think some of the Asian names translate as the mushroom of immortality. So yeah, I'm going up there next week, hopefully, if I can get out, and I hope to find a few of these. I'm not a big believer in medicinal mushrooms, but a lot of my friends are, and so they make a nice gift, and they look cool, and it's fun to find. And when they're young, you can cut off the little thin, soft white rim at the edge of them, and you can make a broth that's just you boil them, and they're as good as any beef broth you ever had. They're delicious. They're not bitter like the mature reishi. And you can even cook that, but it's kind of slimy. It's like eating a slug, but the flavor is out of this world. Okay, let's see. A couple more species, and then we'll wrap things up here with some sort of resources for you to consult if you want to know more. These are honey mushrooms. This isn't a really good picture of them because it doesn't show how they grow in big clusters. I'm going to replace this picture, I think. But the key feature here is they have a very striated stem. And if you, especially below the ring, it gets to be a little more bare as you get up higher. But if you take that, you find these growing in a cluster, they're an aggressive parasite. They will kill a living tree. So we find them on various species of trees, probably most oftenly aspens. But if you take this striated stem and you grab an end of it and start peeling it away, it will peel like string cheese in long fibrous strips. And so that's good for identification, but it's also good for cooking, because if you find a big old one where it's a big old floppy cap and you go, this is probably way too pungent and nasty to eat. Well, go ahead and throw, the younger ones, yeah, the caps are what you want, and the stems are okay too when they're really young and rounded. But when you get a big old nasty one with a big fat stem, cut off the cap, throw it away, strip the fibrous skin of the stem, called the stipita pellets in scientific talk, strip away that skin, and you take the soft core of that stem, and it's a delicious edible, even when the mushrooms are very old. This is one that you need to cook well. It will upset some people's stomachs. So don't go and eat a pound of them the first time you find one. This one is Floccularia. This one's probably Floccularia Americana, or Floccularia albolinaris is a little more sort of brownish color. This is one that's often overlooked. It has a distinctive sort of shaggy stem underneath, except it has a bare spot above the ring. The stem is bare up here. And for that reason, this was considered to be a relative of honey mushroom for the longest time. And it was an armillaria instead of Floccularia, but now it's Floccularia, named for the shaggy stem. And these things tend to grow in 1s and 2s and 3s. They don't grow in big troops or clusters, but it's very rare that you'll be walking through the White Mountains in season and not see at least a few of these. And if you're diligent about picking them up, you can get enough for a dinner pretty easily. And this is a very good edible. A lot of people really like this one. And I think Colorado, it tends to get eaten. Colorado and Arizona are the only places I've ever seen anybody mention it as a good edible. But it's pretty easy to identify with that shaggy, scaly yellow stem, and then the white bare spot above the ring, and then the kind of free gills there. And yeah, it's tasty. Cauliflower mushrooms. Someone found one of these yesterday up on the Mogollon Rim, and they'll be here any day now in the White Mountains. This is one that grows on the East Coast, Harissium Americanum. Most of our ones on the West Coast are not this species, but the ones that grow in Arizona are. And I'll show you a little bit later how distinctive they are. But these are a delicious edible, easy to identify, enough to feed your whole family for a week when you find a really big one. And you have to be pretty diligent about cleaning them. The bugs love them too. And so you have to be, you have to tear them apart and clean them and get all the bugs out. So that's kind of a hassle, but it's worth it. They're good. I think they taste like morels and I love them. So when you find one of these, count yourself lucky. They tend to come along in the early season in the, Douglas fir habitat. And sometimes they're super common. Here's, 4 good cauliflower mushrooms and a couple of big reishi that we found just in within a couple hundred yards of the road up by Greens Peak one time. We've got a bunch of Cortinarius. I think this one's Cortinarius subviolaceus or something like that. See the fibers. Most of them are not edible. True experts can eat them if they wish. There's a few that are edible. Not recommended by our club or by me. Yeah, there's zillions of them here. And if you're a Cortinarius expert and you want to find a new species, I'd say come on down. We've probably got a half dozen you can find on any given day. And then I should just point out that a lot of the species, the lobsters, the Caesar's amanitas, the Barrows boletes, we find them very commonly down in the Ponderosa pine and oak and aspen forest, but we also find them up here in the mixed conifers. So, and then we've got zillions of amanitas. This is from section Validae, the blushers. This is Amanita, the new name is Amanita cruentillamurum, which is kind of a mouthful. It used to be, it was started as Amanita rubescens, the blusher, but that's a European species. So then they said, well, it's Amanita amerirubescens for North America. And then someone said, well, wait, the ones on the West Coast are different. So those are Amanita novanupta. And that's what I learned this one as. And then someone came along and said, well, no, the ones that grow in the Rocky Mountains are different from the ones that grow on the coast. So those are Amanita cruentillamurum. But they're all section Validae of Amanita. They're all edible. Unlike most other Amanitas, they just have a swollen base with no real vulva. And this kind of shiny mother of pearl color on the cap is distinctive. And then they really bruise pinkish when you cut them or bruise them. And this is an excellent edible. However, it does contain a toxin that will cause, I can't remember, it's not rhabdomyolysis. It's toxic to your red blood cells, as I recall. But the good news is it's killed by heat and disintegrates when you cook them, and it's a delicious edible. This is really a good one. Again, not for beginners, but once you learn them, they're easy to identify, and sometimes they're here in huge numbers. Then section Vaginatae, I think this one is Amanita pachycola, if I recall right. And these are the grisettes. All of these are edible, and most of them are pretty tasty. But these are white-gilled amanitas, and if you get it wrong, you'll die. So don't take these ones lightly. But there's a bunch of them that grow here, and some of them are pretty darn tasty. Here's another one in the same category. This is probably Amanita stania, named for the resemblance of the cap to metal like tin or pewter, stania being from the Latin name for tin. So they have this gray tin or pewter colored cap, typically a big single patch instead of a bunch of small warts, and then a floppy little vulva here and no ring. So this is another one of the grisettes in section Amanita section Vaginatae. We have a lot of them. Here it is again. And here's another one. This is Amanita nishidae from down in the southeast corner. This one's edible too. A little similar to that Aspen Amanita I showed you a while ago, but more brown. And then this is one that doesn't have a name at all. Ed Coleman found this one on a few years ago. And I tell you, this is the most beautiful mushroom I have ever seen. It's like a gold nugget. It shines like gold. It's so gorgeous. And I've been hoping to find it again, but I haven't found it yet. It's so cool. Again, section Vaginata, so it should be edible, but it's too pretty to eat. That one was found at Hannigan Meadow. This is our Amanita muscaria, and the ones we have here are, I think all of them are Amanita muscaria subspecies flavivulvata, and that means they have a little bit of a yellowish tinge to the ring zone down here in the rudimentary rings in the vulval zone at the base. But this is your classic Amanita muscaria. Now in Europe, they use this one for hallucinatory or intoxicating purposes. It contains ibotenic acid and muscimol, which are these intoxicating things. Here, the people who've tried them in Western North America say that it just makes you sick and sleepy, and there's no hallucinations, there's no euphoria, there's nothing except being sick to your stomach and feeling crappy and going to bed early. So we don't recommend these for intoxicating purposes. Some people parboil them, boil the toxins out, and then eat them. I've tried it. I don't recommend it. It's not a bad edible, but the nice thing about these is whenever these are fruiting, so are the porcini. So if you find these, you will almost certainly find porcini somewhere nearby. And anybody who would pick this one over a porcini, a Boletus rubriceps, to eat is out of their gourd, if you ask me. It's not a bad mushroom, but it's not worth the trouble to boil it. Related to it, also in Amanita, genus Amanita, section Amanita, is this one plus this one, which is either a light-colored pantherina or a jamata, Amanita jamata. They're two related but slightly different groups. And the way you tell these is the structure of the vulva. They'll have the warts on top, just like a muscaria, but the color will be different. It will be brownish or tan or light yellow or sort of a creamy off-white like this. But the vulva, instead of having shaggy rudimentary rings, it will be circumferential, and it will be like a little collar, or it'll look like an urn at the base, like you plant a plant in, or an urn or pot with a rim that goes very short but stiff right around the base of the mushroom. Again, toxic. Some people boil out the toxins and eat them. I strongly recommend you don't do that. Then we have, here's one. I found these two side by side. So the one on the right is the Caesar's Amanita, which is a good edible. The one on the left, if it's not the Western destroying angel, Amanita ocreata, it's something very close to it. This is in Amanita section Phalloideae, and this one mushroom is enough to kill most people without treatment. And it's very toxic. The morphology of it is almost exactly the same. You've got a big floppy ring. You've got this big sort of stiff white vulva. The two differences are, one, the striations at the edge of the margin. You can see the little stripes here. I don't know if it reproduces well enough for people to see that. You don't really see that on the Amanita section Phalloideae, although they can have little sort of rudimentary groups when they're young. So, and then the other key feature, the Caesar's Amanita has buttery yellow gills. These are really bright yellow gills, and these are chalk white on the destroying angel. So if you're looking for Amanitas to eat, these buttery yellow gills, there's none that we know of that have that color gills that are toxic. So look for the butter yellow gills. Some of the times you'll find these Caesar's Amanitas that have pretty light colored gills. They're kind of an off-white, creamy, very, very light yellow color. If I'm not certain of them, I don't eat them. They got to look like butter, or I'm not going to touch them. Here's another one in probably section Lepidella. I don't know the name of it, but it's something along the lines of Amanita smithii. And these are toxic to your kidneys. Don't eat them. As far as I know, there's no preparation to make them safe. Some of these have a really interesting chlorine smell, and they're fairly common. And then, we've only scratched the surface here, and we're already, at 2 hours talking about this. There are at least, 1,300 is probably a ridiculous underestimate. There's probably 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 other species of fungi that grow in this state. And we have had up to almost 200 at our annual forays when we meet and collect them and try and bring work up a species list. We sometimes approach 200 different species. And if we had more identifiers and people who knew some of the real oddballs, I'm sure we'd get 200 plus 300, who knows how many on just one.
We got a question from Job for you on the Amanita.
Yeah.
I think it's a tricky question. I'm curious how you're going to answer it. It's is one of the key identifiers of the edible Amanitas the deeper striations on the edge of cap?
Yes, and I'm going to show you a picture here real quick. I think that's the next thing. We've had a nice chewing the rag here, so I'm running over time, but
yeah,
you guys will stick with me. I'm okay for the time being to keep talking. This is a pivot rock on the west end of the Mogollon Rim. Pretty cool place and looks like a giant bolete. So just thought I'd throw that in for fun. So I want to talk just a little bit more about the species we have here and how curious it is that we have all these weird species in Arizona that are found nowhere else nearby. And I think the key is here, we sit at sort of the crossroads of North America for different mushroom species. And we have a lot of the same mushrooms they have in the Rocky Mountains as you get further north. We have Trent up there in Colorado finds a ton of the same species we've talked about today. But we also get species that are found really, if you don't find them in Arizona, the only place you find them is up along the West Coast, up in the Northwest. And there's a fair amount of overlap there. And then we also get stuff that comes up from the Sierra Madre in Mexico, and there's actually contiguous forestation that goes all the way to the East Coast here. So some of the species that we have, if you look at the maps, and I'll show you some, you find them all over the Northeast and maybe the Southeast and maybe in Mexico or maybe not. And then you find them in Arizona, and you don't find them in Colorado, you don't find them in California, you don't find them in Oregon or Washington or Montana. They're the only western outpost of some of these species is right here, and especially southern Arizona, where we sort of spill over into the fungi of northern Mexico. So this is that Spiraceus that we showed you. This is Spiraceus Americana of the Arizonica variety. And there's two ways to remember it. Number one, it's got a pinkish tinge to it. And people who come here from the West Coast, and they've been picking Spiraceus radicata on the West Coast, they'll look at our cauliflower mushroom and say, well, this isn't good. This one's gone bad. It's turning brown. It's nasty. And but that's the way it grows. It's pink right from when it's a young. Right from the start, it's got this pinkish tinge and is not kind of white or cream colored. And then the other thing is it's got a much more fimbriated edge to all the little leaflets here. This isn't a great picture, but I thought, let me back up here. Maybe I can show you. These little leaflets have a lot more irregular crenellated or fimbriated edges. And so it's like the difference between Fiocchi rigati and farfalle, if you're a pasta connoisseur. So that's the way you identify ours. Now, people have found some that might be Spiraceus radicata as you get further west and north, like up on the North Kaibab Plateau. Maybe that's what it is. But if you find it in the White Mountains or southern Arizona, it's usually this pink Spiraceus Americana variety Arizonica. So, and it's a choice edible, as I said before, requires a lot of cleaning, but it's worth it. So here's all the places that Spiraceus Americana grow. Arizona and the Appalachians, basically. But that's what the DNA says. The DNA says it's not related to Spiraceus radicata of the West Coast. It's not related to Spiraceus crispa of Eurasia. And there's 2 or 3 others. There's another one in Asia and a few others. It's not related to any of them. It's only closely related to the ones that grow in the Appalachians. We talked about Boletus rubriceps. This is a Rocky Mountain species. separated from Boletus edulis by David Aurora, Jonathan Frank, not even 10 years ago. And, you know, one of our favorites. It looks very much like a European species called Boletus pinophilus, or the pine bolete that grows there. But we call it the ruby. And according to Aurora, they've done taste tests, and most people who taste it say it's better than any other porcino. Now, a real Italian would take issue with that, but I've had them in both places, and I think they're at least equal to the ones in Italy. And sometimes they grow in good numbers. This is one from Horace Sheffield about 4 or 5 years ago. Sometimes you can find, if you find one of the so-called magic trees, you can find 20, 30, 50 of them under one tree in the right conditions. And boy, isn't that a nice day when you do. And we talked about the spruce and looking for those north-facing tree lines on the edge of a glade. And then you can find it in the Ponderosa pine. This is Mogollon Rim. This was a day I went out with David Aurora, and it was in June. It was about June 15th, 2015, I think it was. It was a year where we had rains in May and June that we never get. We had a lot of rain, and the boletes popped, and here he is with the bolete that he discovered and named Boletus rubriceps. So he was quite pleased. Didn't think we would find anything like that day. And so here's the distribution again. This is probably, the real distribution is probably here. Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona. I don't think it occurs anywhere else. Maybe the mountains of southern or far west Texas. Maybe, you know, Mount Charleston, you know, maybe some of the mountains in Southern California. I doubt it. I think this is only what we do. This is misidentified Boletus grandidiolus, and this is, who knows what this person was thinking. It wasn't Boletus rubriceps. And then Barrowsii, we talked about before. Again, another porcino, fully the equal of the rubriceps on the table, just that has the light white colored cap. Tends to grow in lower elevations, and it tends to be more aggressively colonized by the fungus gnats. So you really got to get there early. If you find one of these that's bug-free, you've really got a treasure. This is from 2016 around Flagstaff. If you took, what is it, 183 going up to the Snow Bowl out of Flagstaff, everywhere you looked, these mushrooms were there. You could gather hundreds of them. It was easy. And flat ground, I mean, you could go through the woods with a wheelbarrow and fill it in a day or less. So this is like 15 minutes, 20 minutes picking. And this is another one. This is Lisa Goodwin's picture. This is part of our logo. This one was perfect. It was perfect in every way, bug-free and perfectly symmetric. And so now it's part of the AMS logo. And here's the Boletus Barozii. Here in the southwest, it grows under Ponderosa pine. Along the coast, it has other, I think it grows with certain kinds of coastal oaks and maybe manzanita, I'm not sure, but it grows all the way up to British Columbia. These may be real collections, or they may be, you know, sunburned Boletus edulis, Boletus grandidiolus, or something like that, or Rex Barris, I don't know. I'm not certain these would be Barrows boletes, but here they are here. And I think they do have them in Mexico too, so this is probably legit. And then we talked about Amanita cochiseana, the Caesar's Amanita, and this grows well into Mexico, or some species that are very related to it. And you'll find it in markets in northern and central Mexico. And Jovi, there's your striated edges right there. Look at how deep those grooves are. They are really firm. There's no poisonous member of the phalloides that has grooves or sulcations or striations that are that deep and well formed. And then, and here they are again, and you can see the striations at the edge that sort of run into the gills, buttery yellow gills, buttery deep yellow grills. And then the ring itself is striated. I don't know if I have a picture, But if you look at the top of the skirt or ring on the stem, you will see that it's got the same striations where it meets the gills. And then it's got probably the biggest and proudest and stiffest of all the vulvae in the whole Amanita family. This thing is almost like leather that sticks way out. And you never really find it sort of stuck to the stem like a lot of other species. Like the vaginatas, the vulva will often be just a floppy little thing that'll be stuck to the base of the stem. Not in this one, it sticks way out proud. And this is the only place you really find it. And I question that one in Colorado. I think someone may have brought it to the Telluride Mushroom Festival on their way up from Arizona or New Mexico. So I don't know. In the very, very southern part, you know, down in the Sangre de Cristos, you might find it. Here's another curiosity from Mount Graham. And this one is a fairly well-known bolete from the East Coast, Gyroporus cyanescens. Cyanescens means turning blue, and it really does turn blue. It's called the cornflower bolete in, you know, the common name. And you cut it and you get this really rapid staining, and it's really quite distinctive. And it has this kind of ugly multi-chambered stipe that looks like it's got rotten cheese in it. But I'll tell you, if you eat this, it cooks up just fine and the blue goes away and it turns a lovely golden brown, and it's as delicious as any porcino I've ever eaten. It's really, really good edible. It's the only one I've ever found, but it was up on Mount Graham.
Hey, on the note of this cyanescence, April asked if there were any bioluminescent mushrooms in Arizona.
Yeah, we have some jack-o'-lantern mushrooms that are bioluminescent, but only faintly so. That's Omphallotus. I think the one that grows here, there's several species. There's Omphallotus olivaceus or something like that. And the one we have here is not very bioluminescent, but if you put it in a, you know, get your eyes accustomed to the dark, you can, in a real dark room, you can see it. As a rule, though, we don't find very many of those. Those tend to be in tropical areas. You know, Taylor Lockwood has gone down and photographed dozens of species of them down in the Amazon, places like that. Pretty cool. Those are neat mushrooms. I'd like to see them in the flesh. I never have. And but yeah, not really a feature of what we have around here. So let's see. I was going to show you Gyroporus cyanescens. So let's talk about cyanescens. Cyanescens means becoming blue or turning blue. And so here it is. If I scratch those gills, and then let's see if I don't really have a controller where I can. Oh yeah, I do. So let's zoom it up a little bit here. Look how quickly those turn blue. Whoop! How about that? Nice cornflower blue. And then if I do it again, now I'm going to cut the stem or the cap and, you know, the context or flesh of the cap.
Take a close up of the.
And now as we hold that, within 15-20 seconds, boom, cornflower blue. See that? So that was kind of cool to find. And here's the distribution. Very common in the Northeast, and where a lot of people pick it for the table. And one lonely little southwestern outpost here. It's never been found. I've heard of people finding it up in sort of Alberta, British Columbia, northern Montana. I've never seen anybody post it on Mushroom Observer or iNaturalist. So I think this is an eastern species that happened to find its way down south through the you know, piney woods of South Texas or something, and then came up the Sierra Madre to Arizona. Here's the parasol mushroom, Macrolepriota. This is very similar to the Macrolepriota procera that grows in Europe. It's a real favorite in Europe. I think I call it the parasola in Italy. I know the various names for it in Spain. This is a big one in Galicia in northern Spain. They have a mushroom festival every year there that's all about this mushroom. It's a very, very desirable mushroom in Poland. They call it the kania there. And we have them here. If it's not Procera, it's a very closely related species. And you can see, if you look very closely, what distinguishes this is this snakeskins pattern on the stem right here. And from the top, it looks just like Chlorophyllum molybdites, you know, the one we find in the lawn every year and get sick on. It's the one that causes the most poisonings in Arizona and across the country every year. It looks just like this, except it doesn't have the snake skin at the bottom, and it has a green spore print instead of a white one. This one has a white spore print. So, and then the other thing you want to distinguish with this is you want to make sure it's of a sizable, you know, a good size, at least 10 centimeters or, you know, 4 to 5 inches across, because it can be confused with smaller lepiotas. This is a macro lepiota or a big lepiota, and the little lepiotas, some of those are quite poisonous. So make sure it's big, make sure it's got a white spore print, and make sure it's got the snakeskin stem. But it's a tasty mushroom, and Bill Warner gave me some once, and it's really nice, really delicious. Not real common, but you can find them down south along the border with Mexico in the oak woodlands. And here's the distribution on Mushroom Observer. I'm not sure if this one in the Pacific Northwest is legitimate or not. It might be, but it's mostly to the east, except here in Arizona. So I love it that we can show people such weird mushrooms. You know, people come from California, they come from the Rockies, they come to Arizona, and they see stuff they will never see up there. But they'll see it if they know the East Coast varieties. So here's Hariachromapes, the chrome-footed bolete. This one, it started as Boletus chromapes, and then it was put in Tylopolis because it has pink pores. And then it was put in Lexinum chromapes because it has pink scabers on the stalk that look almost like a Lexinum. And then finally it ended up in its own genus, Haria. So I don't know who Harry was, but this is his mushroom. And so the name, the chrome-footed bolete or the yellow-footed bolete, refers to this bright yellow color at the base. And we find this one under ponderosa pines in the Mogollon Rim country especially. We see this very commonly, and it's a good edible. It's a little citrusy. It's not as good as a porcino, and it tends to be bug infested, but it's not bad if you find one in good shape. And then here again, one of these oddities that, you know, either comes, well, we see them from the east, we see them from the north, we see them from the west, and we see stuff that comes up from the south, from Mexico, that probably doesn't grow anywhere else in the US, and this is another one. Okay, and then just a brief word about fire morels. We get forest fires every summer. They're real common here. It's part of the natural cycle. It's disappointing whenever it happens, but almost every year we get a flush of fire morels. It's rare that we get none at all. Most of them are Morchella sextillata or Morchella eximia, and they're pretty much impossible to tell apart from each other just by morphology. You have to do DNA studies. Nobody cares. We pick them all and eat them all indiscriminately. We also pick some black naturals that we have, several species of, the most well-known of which these days is Morchella kaibabensis, that was a black natural that was discovered on the North Rim by, on the Kaibab Plateau by our own Terry Clements. And then there's a few other types. And they're all delicious. And when they come along, they grow in vast, vast numbers when the conditions are good. I think this is Ed Coleman's picture. And just jillions of them. That was the San Juan fire in the White Mountains. And it was about a 7,000 acre fire. And I'll bet it produced 10 tons of these. I know there were some commercial pickers that snuck in there. You could go there for a month. We kept getting hurricanes come and dump 3 inches of rain in the fall, of all things. And every time it did, there'd be another pop a week later, and another, you know, you'd go up and pick another 40 pounds, just as easy as falling off a log. Here they are. This is another one of those that we got on the San Juan fire. This, however, is something different. This is your Morchella tomentosa, the fuzzy foot morel or the gray fire morel. And you can see it's got a gray cap and a blackish or dark gray stem. and the little grooves on it have a kind of a different shape. They're kind of more chamber-like and less groove-like. Well, this is a delicious edible. We don't find it very often. We found a few last year up on the Stina Fire on the North Rim, and I think it's the most delicious of all morels. I love it when we can find them. And here's the only places we find them. We find them here, we find them up in the Sierras, and we find them up in the Pacific Northwest, kind of inland where the forest fires have been. And they do grow in Colorado. I found a bunch last summer on the Burro Creek fire in, August. It was August 12th, I think. I took a foray out from the Telluride Mushroom Festival. I led them down there on an all-day foray, and we did pretty well. I think we found probably 30, 40 pounds, maybe more, among all the people there picking. And it was a real steep north slope. They had heavy snow the 2018, 2019 winter there. And steep north slope held that moisture and cool temperatures until the middle of August. We went out there and really slayed them. So that happens late into the summer with the gray morels. And then once in a while, when we're really lucky, we get a bunch of Mexican hurricanes come up, we get these fall fire morels. And I like this picture because it shows our yellow aspen leaves falling in October. And here's a nice brand new fresh morel. And a lot of you have seen this. We call this the Brigadoon video because it was this patch of mushrooms where, if you've seen that movie called Brigadoon, it's this place that opens up once every 100 years. The magic bridge opens up and you can go in there and you'll never come out. And I never come out of this place. This is what I see in my dreams. So, and this was early October. This was like the first week in October, about 8,000 feet elevation, about halfway between Pine Top and Greer on the San Juan fire. And I mean, there were easily 1,000 morel mushrooms within 100 feet here.
That's just remarkable that happened in the fall too. That's
it's crazy. It's
unheard
crazy.
of, really.
Yeah, look at them all. So there they are.
Christina's asking about, do fire morels happen often in the fall? And the answer's like, never. Normally, anybody smart would say, no, they don't happen in the fall.
Yeah.
But there you go. You found it in the fall.
Again, it's all about the habitat. Mm-hmm. And the habitat here, take a close look right at this picture. These are Douglas firs that have been burned about halfway up. You can see the orange leaves or the orange needles on the bottom. You can see some of them still have green tops. So these are living trees. They've just been scorched and stressed. And they send out a stress signal to the mycorrhizum that grows with them. And they say, hey, you need to find new digs. I can't spare any more sugar for you. You better fruit and go somewhere else. I'm evicting you. And so that's what happens. And so the green moss, this is just the slight north slope. This is facing north. This is perfect fire morel habitat. It just happens to be in October instead of May. And it depends on prolonged fall rains in September, October. And if you get a real active hurricane season in Mexico, boom, up they come. And we got 11 inches that month in October, 11 inches of rain, late September and October. And boy, did we kill it. Okay, then just a brief run through the Arizona mushroom calendar. So the winter, we talked about all those riparian species, winter oysters, torts, and Podaxis. Once you get into late February, March to mid-April, we start to see the yellow morels starting down, way low down, like on the San Pedro River, Gila River, Hassayampa and Agua Fria rivers, way down low, and climbing up, get up to the Verde River by late March, mid-April, up around Cottonwood, Camp Verde, and so forth. And then late April to May to early June, we start to see the fire morels. Then when the monsoons start to show up, the first few weeks after that, we start to see the oysters, the giant sawgill, Neolentinus. We see reishi and other brackets. And then late July, right now, to early September, that's when things really start rocking and we get the biggest diversity. And then we get some late stuff, and especially if the rains continue, we get hedgehogs, we get velvet foots, we get the Harissiums, the winter oysters start to come back. And then once in a blue moon, about every decade, I'm told, we get the fall fire morels. And so one last look at the map. I'm not going to give away our secret spots, but if you don't know Arizona and you want to have a few places just to get started, get a pen and paper, and I'll give you a few roads that'll at least start the ball rolling, okay? So up on the Kaibab Plateau, north rim of the Grand Canyon, it's a long drive, but it's usually worth it if they get the rains. So Forest Road 22 is kind of near the high point of the Kaibab Plateau. It's definitely worth a look up around there. In Flagstaff, probably the best mushroom picking all around Flagstaff is great. But west and northwest of the peaks tends to be the best. So Hart Prairie Road is a place where a lot of locals go and pick, all the way up to Kendrick Peak, which is the next sort of big mountain on the way to the Grand Canyon. The famous Rim Road, FR 300, that traverses the Mogollon Rim in the middle of the state above Payson. Most everybody has picked mushrooms up there if they've been doing it for any length of time here in Arizona. Then the White Mountains, of course, and probably the Highway 273 that goes past Big Lake down through Three Forks to Alpine. There's mushrooms all along that road. So those will get you started without giving away too many secret spots. So enjoy. And here's just a few resources that we can talk about. We're almost done now. We have the Arizona Mushroom Society, which is the state mycological society. We're affiliated with NAMA. We have around 500 members, or maybe more, I don't know. And we do a bunch of events. In a normal year, we have at a minimum 6 or 7 different events through the year: forays, dinners, lectures, whatever. Lately, in recent years, we've been doing a dozen or more events every year. We're not very good about doing regular meetings. I'd like to change that, but we have occasional meetings that we call, and then an annual meeting at December, where we have a potluck dinner. We have a lot of we have a Facebook page. Our Facebook page for the Arizona Mushroom Society is just a static page where we put announcements and stuff. There's not a lot of conversation that goes on there. And then we have our actual web page where a lot of the housekeeping and dues paying and event planning and stuff goes on. And then we have like Twitter and Instagram that gets posted on once in a while when there's something important to say. Then we have the Arizona Mushroom Forum. Well, this started as a blog that I did about 7 years ago, Arizona-mushrooms.org. Well, that still exists, but I haven't updated it in at least a year, maybe 2. It's a ghost town now. And what ended up happening is that the tail was wagging the dog. So now we have the Facebook group, Arizona Mushroom Forum Facebook group, and that's where all the conversation takes place. We've got 4,000 members of it. Most of them are in Arizona, but we have members from around the world, people who are visiting here, used to live here, just want to see what's going on in other parts of the mushroom world. And eventually I'm going to take there's some useful informational pages on the old blog, and eventually I'm going to put them all, I'm going to take them from there and I'm going to put them all on the Mushroom Society webpage. And then I'll close down the actual blog and it'll just be the Facebook group. There's the Arizona Mushroom Growers Association, if growing stuff is your bag. I think Dr. Barry Pryor at the U of A, he's big in the mushroom growing world. I think, this is his sort of organization. And they often have workshops. So if you want to learn how to do mushroom growing, they do them around the state, and you can go to those and learn how. We do them in the Mushroom Society as well, but people that are like interested in commercial mushroom growing would probably rather go to this particular club. Arizona Mushroom Primer. This is one of our members, Eric Nelson, former board member. He's a really smart, real mycologist, unlike the rest of us. And he's put together a page that has a lot of more detailed data sheets about some of the mushrooms that grow here, especially the edibles. You can get on iNaturalist, and you go to the Fungi of Arizona project on iNaturalist, and you can see whatever's happening these days. A lot of people now are posting on iNaturalist, and it's a good place to see if anything's popping. And it's a good place to sort of go through and do a show and tell if you're interested. We can do that after the lecture if people are not tired of hearing my voice and you want to stick around and see more stuff. And then we've got Mushroom Observer. If you go and search for Arizona, you can see all the stuff that comes up on Mushroom Observer. That seems a little quieter lately. I don't see people posting as much there. iNaturalist is nice because it's got a really easy app to use on your iPhone or your Android. And I think it's stealing a lot of the market share from Mushroom Observer. But Mushroom Observer is, I think, a little more scientifically oriented and rigorous about taxonomy and stuff like that. They're both very worthwhile sites. I recommend them both. I try and post both places. Oops, was that the end of it? Oh, this came up automatically. Holy crap. I didn't mean for that to happen.
Cylindrical
this is Jim Warnicki's page. His thing is called Fish Head Productions.
It's not, we're just seeing white, Chris.
Uh-huh.
We're not seeing that.
Oh, you know what? It popped up here. Can you see that?
Symbols
No.
to rocket.
So it's Arizona's most edible mushrooms from Fish Head Productions. And I don't know how the link popped up automatically. It shouldn't have done that, but it did. So, okay, so bring your shared window to the front. How do I bring my shared window to the front? Oh, resume share, here we go. Okay, so did you guys see that? So that's Arizona's 11 most edible mushrooms. A nice video put together by Jim Warnicki. And there's another one here. I'll send these to you, Trent, so you can post them.
Okay,
and
cool.
One that was done by the Game and Fish Department that Jim used to work for about hunting mushrooms in Arizona. It's on YouTube too. It's a really nice introduction. And then fishheadproductions.net if you want to actually buy the streamed video or the CD that, you know, if you're a novice at this and you want to learn mushrooms, that's actually not a bad way to do it. For habitat and land ownership, there's an outfit up in Colorado called Modern Forager. Do you know them, Trent?
Yeah, highly recommended.
I highly recommend them too. They're great people, and they have they have two things that I really admire. One is that book that they published on hunting fire morels. It's hands down the single best resource for learning how to find fire morels that's ever been published. I totally recommend it to anybody. And then the other thing that they do is curated forest fire maps every spring. They publish maps from all over the West. And, you know, they don't just show you the maps or tell you the names of the fires. They actually go through and look at the terrain. They go, you know, either it's a place they've been to and know, or they look at it on Google Earth, figure out the habitat and forestation and vegetation. And they say, this is a good fire. This is crummy. Go here, not there. And every time I've followed their advice, it's been correct. So it costs a little money, but it's absolutely worth it every spring to buy it and use it. So now, if you're a cheapskate, you can go and find a lot of the same information on InsaWeb, which is a government website where they posted, you know, every agency that fights forest fires posts maps and photos and information and stuff. But it's a slog to go through. It's not indexed well. It actually used to be better, and then they crippled it for some reason. And now you can't find all the old fires are there, but you have to know the name of the fire and do a Google search for it. If you go there and do a search for fires, it'll only show you the fires that are currently burning.
Yeah, I spend dozens and dozens of hours on that site every spring.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. So you can do the work, or you can pay Trent to do it for you. So I prefer to pay Trent. If you want to look at land ownership, the Arizona State Land Department Geographic Information System also called ALRIS, A-L-R-I-S, has a parcel viewer that you can go, which is nice. You can not only confirm that you're on public versus private land, but if there's a juicy private parcel that you want to find out the owner and ask permission, you can do that with this tool. And then I really recommend Gaia GPS. It has a lot of different layers that you can add to your maps. You can look at fire boundaries, historic and current fire boundaries. You can look at land ownership. You can look at hunting units if you're a hunter. You can look at topo lines, you know, elevation lines, satellite images, any kind of map you can imagine. You can make a custom map with it on Gaia GPS, and then you can download it, and then you can go out in the sticks where there's no cell phone service, and you can use the map with the GPS. And the map works just like you had a cell phone connection. It's a great program. And then everybody who hunts mushrooms seriously knows about Google Maps and Google Earth. You can, you know, I've gotten to the point now where I can distinguish fir and spruce from ponderosa pine just from Google Maps. And it helps a lot. And looking at slopes, looking at riparian zones, you know, are there cottonwoods on that creek bottom or not? And it's great. The National Weather Service has a bunch of great data services. Water.weather.gov lets you look back in time, you know, to whenever you want. Yesterday, last week, last year, 1981, whatever you want, and see what the water accumulation is in the area you're interested in. The weather hazards and data viewer, this map is, it only goes back 3 days, but it's really, really good. It's got a lot of radar estimates of rainfall, and then it also has terrestrial stations so that things are a little better calibrated and a little more reliable than some of the other facilities or resources. Then looking forward, you've got the Weather Prediction Center, the WPC. I post these pictures a lot when it looks like there's rain in the forecast, and I want to stir up the people on the Facebook group. Never fails to get a reaction when there's some pink or yellow or orange on the map from the 7-day QPF map from this site. And then the Climate Prediction Center from the Weather Service. This goes out now, you know, 10-day, 2-week, 1 month, 3-month predictions. Most of it's, you might as well be reading, you know, tea leaves or sheep guts for a reliable prediction, but it's fun to look at. And then they all have field offices in Flagstaff and Phoenix and Tucson are the ones here. And they're valuable resources. They all have websites and Facebook pages, so I encourage that. Weather Underground has something called the Wonder Map that's really good for looking at radar in real time, looking at terrestrial stations, seeing how much rain has fallen. The IntelliCast map, you go back a week and see where rain has fallen. Tropical Tidbits has a nice ensemble. What an ensemble prediction is they gather predictions from weather agencies all over the world, the Japanese and the Europeans and, you know, whoever, and they put them all together and sort of average them out and say, we think this is how much rain is going to fall over the next week or 2 weeks or whatever. So that's pretty useful. This is the Snowtel network. This is especially good for morel hunters. You want to see how much snow fell. They've got a map where you can zoom in. It's really sophisticated. There's a lot. You can look at rainfall, snowfall. You can compare it to average years. You can see how much you're lagging or ahead of the time. You can, they have some really nice charts that show how much snow has built up and how fast it's melting. And then they'll have, you know, the same chart will have the average for, you know, over 30 years of when the first snow comes, where it peaks, when it melts, and you can compare. And like when we went to find all those gray fire morels up in Colorado, I looked at that burrow fire, and there's a snowtail right there. And I was looking at it, and I'm like going, this snow isn't going to melt until late July, you know, because I was looking at the chart and sort of extrapolating. And this was in May, and I'm like, they've still got 9 feet of snow there on the ground in mid-May. It's not going to be gone until the until the mushroom festival comes. And as it turned out, I was right. So that's a really useful resource for the morel hunters. And then this guy Stu in Flagstaff has a weather blog that's really informative. He's always sort of looking at what's happening with the monsoon. And let's see. And then we talk about the national forests. They each have a spot. And then some books I'll recommend to you. This one is the sort of main guidebook for the Southwest by Jack States. He's a retired professor. I think he was at NAU, but I don't remember. He's big into truffles. So if you like truffles, we have a few here, and he's got them all in this book. The mushrooms, the names are out of date, but the mushrooms don't change, only the names change. So it's still a useful resource. It's out of print, and last time I looked for it, it was kind of expensive, but you kind of need it if you're going to do serious mushroom hunting here. Then this is another great book for this area. This is from Vera Stuckey Evanson, who's a member of our Facebook group, and it's Mushrooms of the Rocky Mountain Regions, and most of the stuff I've shown you today has been in this book. And this is another one that she's a co-author on with Cripps and Quo. And this is a kind of a cool book because it goes through things by habitat, just like I did in the first part of my presentation, where I walked through, desert to riparian to PJ forest to to ponderosa to fir and spruce, and they do it the same way here. And I think this is a really nice book for novices. The only thing I don't like, I know the Vera's Rocky Mountain book doesn't have anything about edibility, and some people would complain about that, but otherwise it's perfect. And I think this other one actually does have edibility info, if I recall right. And then, No Serious Mushroom Hunter Can Be Without this one from David Aurora, All That the Rain Promises. This is the one to stick in your pocket or your basket. And then this is a great book for the West Coast species. Desjardins and Wood and Stevens. Mike Wood is a member of our Facebook group too. And this is an outstanding, really, really high quality book. There's another California book that a lot of you know, Mushrooms of the Redwood Forest, and that's by Noah Siegel and Christian Swartz. They've both been, foray mycologists for us at our annual foray. But it's a little more specific to the Redwood Coast. And it's a useful book, and a lot of us have bought it, but most of the species in it don't grow here, so it's not quite as useful. And then that's really the end of the presentation, and I can take questions. If anybody wants to go surfing around some of those websites I showed you and see how they work, I can do that. It's up to you guys. I have to be on the job for my overnight shift in just over an hour. So I can spare at least a half hour if you guys can still stand the sound of my voice after this long presentation. Boy, that ran way over. These turned into nice little chewing the fat kind of sessions, don't they? And go off on tangents. It's a lot of fun. I like this format.
They do go over, and it seems to be okay. And we still have over half our people watching, and I think some people may come back. And we've been getting requests. This will be posted to YouTube in the next 24 hours. So if you want to go back and look at a part of it or catch the end, it will be there. Hey, we did get a question or two for you, Chris. One, people were asking if the slides would be available anywhere.
Well, I hadn't planned to, but if you want them, I can send them out to you. Just send me an email.
Yeah, how about if we just say if anybody wants to get the slides, they can reach out to you directly or me, and I'll connect the dots there as well.
Yeah. ccmaymd@gmail.com.
This was just a fabulous.
Some of these are things like, I've tried to credit everybody that gave me a picture, so I wouldn't use it in some other presentation without checking with them. And particularly, if it's from Aurora or someone else who actually publishes, I wouldn't use it without getting permission. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm happy to share. I do this for my enjoyment, not yours.
Well, then it's a win-win. How about this? How about are there any cordyceps found in?
I I'm not certain. I have never seen one. There are certain fungi that infect bugs and beetles, but I don't think they're actual cordyceps. There's one that they're looking at as a means of control of the pine and spruce beetles that are killing so many trees in all over the Southwest, all over the West. But it's not a cordyceps. I can't remember the name of it, but it kills them dead. I mean, they turn into, white ghosts of what they, what they were. And, but as far as cordyceps, and specifically the medicinal kinds of cordyceps, if they exist here, they're rare, and people don't know very much about them. I certainly don't know anything about them.
Well, I just was curious. I think that was it for the questions. We got just a lot of people saying thank you. Adam and Levi and Christina are all grateful. Brent, Brendan, Ray Lee as well. She loves the long form discussion and said also she was on the double thank you. She was on the, I think it's a she, Ray Lee, was on the foray and Telluride for the burn morels with you.
Oh yeah, that was a real success, wasn't it? Yeah, yeah, that was nice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think everybody who went on it, I think, got at least a meal out of it, and some people got a whole basket full. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we're not going to see you in Telluride this year since it's not really happening, and you have an event
coming up that way. I don't know.
And you have an event coming up though in Arizona.
Yeah. We are doing, we have a couple things happening. We're doing the annual foray. It's going to be completely different this year. We're obviously not getting together like we did before in a hotel or a campground or anything. I mean, there are people that can camp together if they want, but basically we're meeting for small groups of like 10 or 12, and we're going to completely maintain distancing during the foray and masking anytime we're close to each other. And it's only going to be the small groups, and we'll just meet up basically in the field and go on our trips. So it's a bit demanding because it requires a lot of foray leaders, but a lot of folks have stepped up, realizing that, these are unusual times. And if we're going to have anything like a normal foray, we're going to all have to pitch in and do stuff like that. Yeah. And so, there won't be any dinners, there won't be any lectures. We maybe can do show and tell, with proper distancing at the end of each foray, but that's about it. So we've got a bunch of those all planned for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. What is the weekend? Let me look at the calendar. I want to say 15th, 16th, 17th. Is that right? Let me see here. Anyway, if you go to the Arizona, it's 14th, 15th, 16th. If you go to the Arizona Mushroom Society webpage, there's an event page on there. You go to the event calendar and you'll see it. Now, I'm pretty sure it's full. There's a lot of pent-up demand and not enough supply. And I think it's filled, but we might be able to accommodate sort of standby people who put in, who sign up for it on a standby basis, and we might be able to accommodate you. And then we're doing something similar for the Flagstaff Mushroom Festival at the Flagstaff Arboretum, and that's, I think, on around the 22nd. It's in late August, and I don't think that they've opened registration for that one yet.
Okay. We're getting confirmation on the chat that it is full. Elizabeth Beth, by the way, also says, Beth Boleto, that thank you as well.
Oh, hi, Beth.
Great. Do you think we should wrap it? This is a new record. We're going almost 3 hours. So.
I know. Gosh. Yeah, this is supposed to be a 60-minute presentation, and it's always a chore for me to keep it that short.
You might have to break it into 2 next time.
Yeah, maybe I should. Yeah, maybe I should. First one about habitat and maps and, terrain and national forests, and then the other about the actual species. That might not be a bad idea.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say thank you as well. And
Okay.
hope if I don't see you in maybe in Telluride in the next week or two, we'll catch you maybe next spring for morels.
It's not out of the question, but yeah, probably not.
Okay.
So
All right.
good luck. I hope you find some good stuff.
All right.
And yeah, heavy rains and heavy baskets, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cool. Bye-bye.